So spooky season has come and gone, and it is officially November 1st right now. We are in the last 2 months of the calendar year. We've got some movies and whatnot coming up here pretty soon, but we've definitely got some email chatter going back to spooky season, and some stuff in the last week that we were chatting about, plus the return of some watch updates, if you will, this particular week. So without further ado, let's dive headfirst into this week's flight chat. Leading off, of course, with John Rossler, who sent 3 emails this week. His first flight chat email, he's titled it, "The Crazy Weekend I Had." Oh, all right. Sounds like John had a busy weekend. He says, "First, quick responses to last week. You pronounced my last name perfectly fine. Also, you don't have to use my first full name. John Rossler is fine as well." Well, that's good, because I just said that. So that is a relief. Cool, thank you. He says also, "That's cool that I have that in common with Scott. He always seemed like a very prideful individual, but virtue pride, not sin pride." Yeah, and that's what it was like in the beginning. Like, it was just, precautionary, if you will. But yeah, no, it's all good. He says, "I should be the one to apologize to you. I wanted to say, do I talk about the Beach Boys too much? Not so I talk about the Beach Boys too much. I hope you can forgive me. Plus, I guess in a way you did answer the question, but I didn't mean to make you sound like the bad guy." No, I wasn't, I didn't get that impression at all. I don't think anybody listening got that impression. No, it is what it is. I mean, that's one of those wordings where, I mean, yeah, I'm sure somebody, if they read it a different way, might be able to take it out of context. I don't think I did, though. I certainly was not taking it as you trying to make me out to be the bad guy. So no, I think we're good on that one. It's all good. No apologies necessary. He says, "I laughed hard last week about your Rick Flag Sr. line about cocaine." I don't even remember what I said, but whatever it was, thank you. I'm glad that it was funny. But yeah, he was. I still think they went a little far with that, to be honest with you. As far as like him doing lines of coke with Lex's boys in the season finale of Peacemaker. But hey, you know what? That show goes off the rails and definitely pushes, into the TVMA territory, well into the TVMA territory. So, yeah, par for the course for that show. But yeah, as far as that character going forward, yeah, I don't know. Not sure what's going to happen with Rick Flag Sr. going forward. But he says, "All right, so here's the recap of the weekend. We didn't win the contest Saturday. Aw, sorry to hear that. But we got lots of pictures," he said, "with people who enjoyed us as the Rangers. Omid had watched MMPR before and watched the 5-part Green with Evil to help give him context. Sunday, my hosting duties were fine. I feel like I was confused half the time, but at the very least, catering had Panda Express after the awards, which was nice. If you guys got a good Panda Express out there, I find that Panda Express, I ask this, like, legitimately, because I find that Panda Express, like, basically all franchised fast food places, they're not all created equal. Right? Like, there's a good McDonald's and there's a not so good McDonald's. There's a better Burger King and a not so great Burger King. That kind of thing, right? And I think, personally, I feel like that's the same with Panda Express. Up here, like, there used to be, and I don't know if it's still there, but we had Panda Expresses in our malls, and there isn't one in the mall up in Flint anymore. But there was one that I went to on occasion at Great Lakes Crossing, and that one always seemed to be better. I don't know what it is. Maybe the sweet and sour sauce is a little tangier or something. Not sure why that was the case. But at any rate, other Panda Expresses that I've gone to were not always that on point, right? Like, they're not all created equal. So is it the same out there where, like, you have good Panda Expresses, bad Panda Expresses? And catering, I don't know that I've ever had Panda Express catering. Panda Express is literally, in my opinion, Chinese fast food. And I don't have an issue with it because I have a wide strike zone a lot of times with Chinese restaurants, even though I do agree that not all Chinese restaurants are created equal. And when you find a good one, you stick with it. It's just that I found a lot of decent ones, right? And like a couple of buffets that are all right. But like, we have like one or two that are like our sacred ground, if you will. The Golden Bowl over in 8 Mile and Coolidge. And Wing Hong Express as well. Like, those are our favorites in that regard. But either way, just curious if, like, how does Panda Express catering handle out there? Like, how does it taste out there? That's a lot more than I thought I was going to talk about Chinese food and Panda Express, but I do love Chinese food. But I'm glad that the hosting duties were fine. I'm glad the event sounded like the event went off fine. He says, "Me, Omid, and Tammy were the only people who wore costumes. We dressed up as the Straw Hat Pirates, and he sent pictures of, is this you in the Red Ranger costume? I forget. Were you Red Ranger? No, you were Green Ranger, weren't you? So this is probably Omid in the Red Ranger costume, right? Pretty sure that's the case. Yeah, yes. I'm seeing the other pictures now. All right, cool. Because I see the delineation. Oh, that's a good cosplay. Works out. Very, very good throwback to the old Mighty Morphin Power Ranger, like those first few years, right? The Green Ranger years for sure. So good deal. Thank you for sending those pictures. He says, I'll send more in the second email, which he did, which I think that is his second email. It's his pictures. He says, I'll also find footage of me doing some hosting at the show. I got a few short questions for this particular email. Number one, he says, who are the people who listen to Daniel RPK or Grace or Umbudo? That's how he wrote it. I didn't say that. He wrote it that way, Umbudo. Or any of these grifters, he says. I'd really like to know what types of lives they live to even entertain the idea of listening to them. It's laziness. It's laziness and it's groupthink, right? And we see a lot of that in real life with like more serious things, politically speaking and socially speaking, right, John? So, yeah, it's the same type of people. Like, there really are a lot of parallels between stuff that happens in fandom and stuff that happens in real life, especially on social media, especially when it comes to grifting and especially when it comes to rage baiting and, trying to elicit a particular response and trying to get people's attention. It's the same damn thing. It's just movies, TV, and other sort of media as opposed to politics or religion or anything like that. So yeah, it's the same con job, and they appeal to the lazy and they appeal to the people who hit the easy button and don't actually want to do the work and don't care to do the work, and they just see a headline on Facebook. They're like boomers and old people. Like I remember some years ago, I had to tell somebody at work. It might have even been one of my bosses. They saw a rumor about something, probably one of the rumors about Favreau and Filoni taking over for Kathleen Kennedy, and it came from Doomcock, and I said, never listen to Doomcock ever, 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 and I had to tell them, no, I don't care what you saw. This, and the thing is, they saw it on YouTube, and the only reason they saw it on YouTube is because, yeah, it was my old boss. His son was watching YouTube like unboxing videos, and that came up in the feed somewhere, and he saw that and clicked on it because he's a huge Star Wars fan. And I had to tell him, yeah, no, I did never listen to that. Absolutely not. That's complete and utter bullshit. No, definitely not. Grifting is a thing for sure. But that's the problem, is how many people actually do the legwork, how many people will actually not go further and try to, find actual sources for what somebody is saying, as opposed to just running with it and going, oh, well, look at this nonsense. No, it's, unfortunately, it appeals to the lazy. Those are the people that are paying attention to RPK and Grace and Umbudo. I've heard so many different colorful nicknames for him. But yeah, that's what it is. It's just people that want to hit the easy button, people that don't want to do the homework and just, assimilate. And these are the people that get easily fooled by AI. And I know AI is getting better, but there's so much bullshit AI on Facebook. These are the same kind of people that get fooled by that on Facebook all over the place, and see fake pictures and think, oh, well, this is actually happening, or oh, they're filming for this. Yeah, the same kind of people, which unfortunately is way too many. One is too many, but yeah, that's who listens to these people. Because you see, every time their shit gets reposted by a regurgitator, like Culture Crave or Discussing Film, or actually not even those. Sometimes those. But even some of the smaller regurgitators, they have thousands of followers, and there are like hundreds of likes that they get for it. And it's like, wow, people just do not pay attention at all. Like, they will just buy anything that these morons sell, and then even when it doesn't happen, there's no accountability. There's no accountability for them whatsoever. Like, oh, they got this wrong. No, there's no accountability at all. Like, they're just allowed to do it. They're allowed to be wrong. They're allowed to lie to people and grift and con them. It's incredibly lazy, and it's very ridiculous. It's lack of accountability. It's unfortunate, but yeah, unfortunately, we do not do a good job of holding them accountable because there are too many lazy people that eat that shit up. All right, number 2. He says, I saw one battle after another. I thought it was good. The commentary wasn't subtle, but I enjoyed a lot of it, especially Benicio del Toro. But the blame for it bombing should go to Warner Brothers. This movie didn't have to be made for that much money, especially if it is indeed in the ballpark of 130 million to 175 million. Did you see it yet? No, I have not seen it yet. And to be honest with you, I forget if I talked about this before, but Paul Thomas Anderson, that is a director that I definitely have seen. It's almost like Spike Lee, because similar in that, like with Spike Lee, I've seen way more of his earlier films than I have a lot of his later films. There's more than a few of his later films that I need to get caught up on. In fact, the Black Klansman, I saw that a couple years ago, and that's like the most recent Spike Lee film that I've seen. I haven't seen Old Boy, I haven't seen Chirac. There's a lot of newer Spike Lee films in the last 10, 15 years outside of Black Klansman and Inside Man that I just have not seen. The same goes with Paul Thomas Anderson. I've seen Boogie Nights. I've seen Hard Eight. Hard Eight is a movie that people don't even, I think, really know he did. Like they've never heard of it. But it's like his first feature film, if I'm not mistaken. Here, let me double check that. Yeah, Hard Eight, otherwise known as Sydney, came out in '96. That's his first feature film. I've seen that movie. At one point, I owned that movie on DVD many years ago. I've seen that. I've seen Boogie Nights. I've seen Magnolia, and I've seen Punch Drunk Love. I've seen all four of Paul Thomas Anderson's. I've seen his first four films. I haven't seen a single one after that. I haven't seen There Will Be Blood. I haven't seen The Master. I haven't seen Inherent Vice. I haven't seen The Phantom Thread. I haven't seen Licorice Pizza, and I have not watched One Battle After Another. And I realize that they're all completely isolated stories, and there's no need for a catch-up. But I don't know. Just there's that OCD part of me that's like, do I want to jump into a PTA movie now when I'm so far behind, right? And he's at 10 movies now. He's at like the Tarantino threshold. I call it the Tarantino threshold because Quentin Tarantino infamously says that he's done after 10 movies, and he's stuck on 9 because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was his 9th. But in Quentin Tarantino's case, he's the one filmmaker, one of the few, that I've seen all of his movies in release order. And that was the case. Before I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I watched The Hateful Eight. I made certain to watch The Hateful Eight before seeing that. And part of the reason is because I wanted to know what other like story techniques that he might have adapted for The Hateful Eight that he might have put into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I'm actually glad I did, because there were a few things that he did in The Hateful Eight that he did put into Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in my humble opinion, that were a little different than his prior structure to some of his earlier films like Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill, etc. Right? So, I don't know. That might be the same case for me with One Battle After Another. I do want to see it. I most certainly want to see it. $130 to $175 million budget. That's a lot. Nothing in that trailer suggested that the movie was going to cost that much. So as far as it bombing, where's it at? According to the wiki, it's at 185 million. But here, let's go to Box Office Mojo and see exactly what it says. Wow, it's not even on the. Okay, it's been a few weeks because I actually have to do the search. It's not on the front page. One Battle After Another. Let's see. So right now at the box office, it's sitting. Yeah, it is still sitting at 185.4 million worldwide. But it's not one of those types of movies. It's not like a blockbuster film that's going to get a ton of the general audience. It's definitely a niche movie. So I don't know if you're going to make it for that much money. You can't be expecting major returns. This is why the box office conversation, like, really has to be refined. Because now I think people are being really stupid. And not you, John, but I think people in general are being really stupid when they're having these conversations because they're judging everything across the board in a vacuum. Under no circumstances would I ever compare One Battle After Another to a superhero movie or anything that came out that was meant to be a blockbuster like Jurassic World Rebirth or something like that. That's dumb. They're not the same type of film. This is an Oscar bait movie. This is a movie that, quite honestly, will probably make the rounds at the awards circuit, to be honest with you. That's the types of movies that PTA does, Paul Thomas Anderson. So I don't understand why we're having a box office conversation about this movie at all. Like, seriously, is he a box office darling? No. I've never known us to ever look at Paul Thomas Anderson as a box office darling. In fact, here, let's look up Paul Thomas Anderson's box office earnings for his career. Okay, just looking at this list, and this is from thenumbers.com because they actually can give you like an aggregate and a list of what a director has made at the box office. The highest box office he's made for any movie is One Battle After Another. Like, seriously, like he's made a little over $500 million at the box office as a director worldwide. Okay, but like, Boogie Nights, that was a 43 million total box office in 97. Magnolia was 48.4 million. Punch Drunk Love, which is probably my favorite Adam Sandler movie, 24.5 million. What are we doing? Like, why are we even having a box office conversation about Paul Thomas Anderson? That's stupid. That's lazy. And again, not you, John. Not saying you, but anybody that is having a legitimate or trying to have any type of a legitimate box office conversation about a Paul Thomas Anderson movie is out to lunch. Seriously, that's so dumb. Like, why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Like, I understand Hollywood is a business, but this dude has been making movies for 20 years and Hollywood hasn't given a shit about how much he's earned. Actually, longer than that, 30 or almost 30 years at this point. And Hollywood, the studios have clearly not cared about how much he's made. And yeah, I get it. Post strike, post COVID, or post 2020, really, because COVID has not ended. COVID is a part of our society. Post all of that, right? Like, I get that people are more hopped up on money and there are way more people that are following box office. This is not the one to follow. We should never be having box office conversations about Paul Thomas Anderson. We should be having award season conversations. We should be having Oscar conversations and Golden Globe and BAFTA conversations about Paul Thomas Anderson, but not box office. That's dumb. That's really silly. I have not seen it yet. I will see it at some point. I don't know when. I might go on maybe one day I go on a PTA binge and get caught up on all the PTA movies I haven't seen before. But yeah, as of right now, no, not at all. But I will see it at some point. So, all right, let's get to John's second email. He said, gave Omid my dragon shield and weapons, paying homage when Tommy first lost his powers in Japan. The reason for Red gaining Green's powers was because, spoilers, the dragon Green Ranger died. Oh, okay, so they just killed him off in Japan. Did not know that. All right, that is not how it happened in the United States. That's for sure. And so, yeah, you sent the links for your hosting. You said you dressed as two different versions of Brooke from One Piece. Earlier in the day, you dressed as Skeleton Brooke, but for the hosting show, you dressed as Human Brooke. I'm aware of One Piece. I am not familiar with the character names, but the way you have got your cosplay set up, okay, I've seen a character that looks like that, so I will say good job, because that definitely looks like close to the character that I've seen, at least from what I can recall. But he's asking, which cosplay do you think the three of us did better at, Power Rangers or Straw Hat Pirates? Let's see. If we're looking at the group photo, I would say, well, okay. I think that Straw Hat Pirates is more like involved. Like, there's more details, right? Like the hat and the skeleton and the like both of your hats. And then also what Tammy's wearing. So I would say detail wise, Straw Hat Pirates is probably better. I would say detail wise, but again, that really has to do with like the medium itself, because it's not like Power Rangers has a ton of details, especially not from that particular era. But yeah, I would say Straw Hat Pirates probably just in terms of attention to detail in that regard. But I think both of them are good. Both of them are really solid. Good job. So number 2 for this email, he says, I have a theory that DCU Batman and Robin have been cast in the DCU. I'm trying to figure out what years the actors need to be apart. I think the actor should be at least a year older than Robert Pattinson. 1985 born actors look promising. So, okay. So your theory is that they have been cast and you're trying to guess who it is? Interesting. So he says, eligible 1985 born actors. Chase Crawford, best known as the Deep in the Boys. Yeah, that would be a weird transition going from an Aquaman parody to Batman. Plus, I need to see him in more stuff. That would be a weird transition, but honestly, it would probably be like a modern day Christian Bale, going from Patrick Bateman in American Psycho to Batman. I know a lot of people, there were friends of mine back then that said, I don't know if I can take him seriously in the cape and cowl after seeing him as Patrick Bateman, and now he's their favorite Batman, like many years later. So yeah, there's always that opportunity, but Chase Crawford, okay. Tom Cullen, virtually unknown. He's more popular in the UK directing films and starring in British film and TV, but he looks like a Bruce Wayne. Tom Cullen. Let me familiarize myself with who that is, because I've heard that name, and I've probably seen this individual. Okay, I have seen it. Where have I seen this guy from? I've seen him in something, or maybe not. Maybe I've just seen him in passing. Okay, no, I am. But Insomnia, there's a 2024 version of Insomnia? No, I don't think I've seen that. I've seen this guy somewhere, and I don't remember not Gunpowder, not Downton Abbey, not Barbarians. I have not seen Barbarians. Is that the same Barbarian? Is this the Zach Kreger Barbarians? No, this is a totally different one. This is a totally different movie. A 2021 horror film written and directed by Charles Dorfman that Tom Cullen stars in. Oh, interesting. Okay, I have seen this guy before in something, or at least maybe I've seen him in passing. I cannot immediately think, oh, he's in Black Mirror. Okay, maybe that was it. Maybe I saw him in whatever episode of Black Mirror he was in. But okay, Bruce Wayne type. You're saying I could see that. I could see that based on his face, based on his physical appearance. Tom Hopper. He says looks more like Booster Gold. Who is Tom Hopper now? I got to Google that one. Tom Hopper. Oh, this guy. Yeah, he's British. I did not know this dude was British. I forget what I've seen him in. Uh, Game of Thrones. It says he was a gay. I don't remember him in Game of Thrones. I've seen him in something else. I feel like I've seen him in something else. I don't know what. This is another one where it's like, okay, I've seen you somewhere and I can't remember exactly. Oh, Dark Fate. He was in Terminator Dark Fate. Okay, I probably saw him in that because I did see Dark Fate and I also enjoy Dark Fate. I'm probably on the island of 4 people that enjoy Dark Fate. But okay. So what did he say? Looks more like Booster Gold. Yeah, I could see that. It depends on like whether or not Booster Gold is actually cast. And then Zach Rohrig actually looks like how Bruce Wayne is usually drawn in the comics, but he hasn't been in anything substantial. I know that name. Zach Rohrig. Let's see. American actor. And oh, yeah. Yes. Okay. I know this dude from the Vampire Diaries. He was Matt in the Vampire Diaries. Yep. I have seen the first 4 seasons of Vampire Diaries. Shonda and I used to watch that on the regular. I dropped out at the start of season 5. One of the originals like kicked up. She kept going. I'm pretty sure she finished that show. Definitely went on to the originals. I don't know if she watched the one after that because there were actually 2 spinoffs of the Vampire Diaries. I could see it depends on his size. I could see that, and it's crazy that he's 40. He's 40, really. I did. It's just weird thinking of Matt from Vampire Diaries as being 40 years old. But hey, Paul Wesley is playing Kirk right now, and he's around that age too. So yeah, and Paul Wesley, of course, was the lead. He was Stefan Salvatore in that movie, in that show, for the I think almost the entirety of its run. Okay, so this isn't a bad list. Not a bad list as far as that goes. But he says Dick Grayson shouldn't be any older than 1999 births. I've seen the name Cameron Boyce floating around. Cameron Boyce. I know that name too. Let's see. Cameron Boyce. Oh yeah. Oh, the freckles. That's probably what the freckles and like his. Wait a minute. But Cameron Boyce, according to this, has passed away. Yeah, that's no good. Wow, I didn't know this. Cameron Boyce, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. So okay, that went dark. Let's move forward from that one. Sorry, I don't think you knew that about that one, John. Jason Todd should be a 2001 or 2002 birth. Milo Manheim, perhaps. Milo Manheim. Who is Milo Manheim? Let's see. Milo Manheim. I feel like I've seen this dude somewhere. He has one of those faces. Looks familiar. What? Not Journey to Bethlehem. Not American Housewife. Not Zombies. Zombies 2. What is this? Zombies 2. Zombies 3. Zombies 4. What are these Disney zombie movies? I don't know what these are. Oh, he was in Thanksgiving. Eli Roth's Thanksgiving. Yeah, no, haven't seen that either. But okay, Milo Manheim. I could see it. Like physically speaking, I could see it. I could see the Jason Todd in that regard. Let's see. Tim Drake's actor shouldn't be younger than 2006. Jacob Tremblay. Okay, that name I know. Let me just remind myself what he looks like. Jacob Tremblay. Wow, he's aged. And when I say aged, I mean he's gotten older. This dude used to be a child. He still is. He's only 19. But yeah. Okay. All right. Damien's actor shouldn't be any younger than 2013. Asher Morissette was. Asher Morissette. Are these models of like who you're thinking as far as like how they could look, or are these actual suggestions? Asher Morissette. Oh, okay. So who is this kid? Who is he? Like. Oh, this is. Hang on. Asher and Alanis Morissette, according to this, are sixth cousins, one time removed. Okay, I don't know what this kid has been in, but I mean the Damien person. Okay, I mean perhaps like as far as him, as he was in the Baxters and he was in the Rookie, and was he in Days of Our Lives? Is that what this is saying? Did I read that right? Yes, he was a character named Thomas Demera in 6 episodes of the Days of Our Lives. Okay, fair enough. I never heard of this kid. All right, gotcha. I wonder if they could bring back Peter Capaldi in a DC project. I could see him as Alfred. All right. So initially, like off the top of my head, I'd be like, no, he's way too much of a personality to be Alfred. But then I say that with Jeremy Irons and Andy Serkis both having played Alfred, excellent Alfreds in the last couple of DC films, last couple of Batman films. They're both really awesome live action Alfreds. Has there been a bad Alfred? No, there really hasn't. There has not been a bad Alfred, as far as I'm concerned, in live action, and certainly not in animated. But live action wise, no. Between movies and television, there has not been a bad Alfred. Alfred has they have nailed that particular casting all across the board. I defy anyone to think of a bad Alfred, and if you're thinking of a bad Alfred, then I tend to question your judgments on Alfred actors as opposed to the actual character itself, in my subjective opinion. So, yeah, I guess in that regard, Capaldi could be Alfred. However, remember, I know that he was the thinker, and yes, he's gone. So yes, they could bring him back. But I don't, and technically, the Suicide Squad is not a DCU film, even though I pretty much consider it a proto DCU film, especially after having recently rewatched it, and it feels like it is it's akin way more to the DCU and Superman and Peacemaker than it is to the DCEU in that regard. And yeah, part of that is because of James Gunn. But either way, perhaps never say never, right? Leave the door open for it. He says, I know you're not into fan castings, but do you think the age balance I'm going for makes sense? I think the age balance you're going for makes sense. I just don't have names for you. I really don't. And if we're speculating that they've already cast Batman and Robin, which I don't think they have, but if we're speculating that they have, then they've got their own names and their own ideas and who they're going to go after, obviously. So either way. So yeah, but I hear what you're saying as far as the age. And all of it has also got to be relative to David Cornsweat's age as Superman in that regard. Like, this really seems like a situation where he's going to be a bit younger. Like, Clark is going to be a bit younger than Bruce, but they're going to be close to the same age in that regard. But obviously, if Bruce has already got Damian, and I know some people that they're wishing, hoping, and praying that that the alleged rewrites to the DCU Batman means they're not going to go with Damian. To which I say, whatever, people, you just don't like new things, right? You want the same old shit, different day. Like, no, it's not enough time for Damian. Who gives a shit? I don't give a shit about how much time there is for Damian. This is not the comics, okay? If he wants to do Damian, let him do Damian. It's a Robin we haven't seen yet. But we haven't seen... Yes, we have, okay? Just because you didn't like Titans, didn't watch Titans, doesn't mean Titans didn't exist. We've had a live-action Jason Todd. We've had a live-action Tim Drake. We have. They count. You want to see them on the big screen? Hey, that's your business. But you know what? If I really want to go down that road, I could tell you that Dick Grayson hasn't had enough screen time on the big screen. Why don't we go back to Dick Grayson? And I'm okay with that. I'm fine if it's Dick Grayson. But I also would like the idea of there being a Bat family. Because if we're talking about a DCU where metahumans have been around for 300 years and Batman surely has existed at this point, he's got to be at Bat family stage. Seriously. We're not doing origin stories, remember? This is not an origin story universe. We didn't do one for Superman. Why the hell would we do one for Batman? We damn sure don't need to do one for Batman. If we didn't do an origin story for Superman in the DCU, we damn sure don't need one for Batman. So stop trying to start over and like go back to the beginning. No. Let him have Damian. Let Damian be Robin, and then we can have Bat family exactly as you've laid out here. And again, I'm not aiming any of that at you, John. I know that we're both more in simpatico with respect to this idea. But yeah, I do like your age range idea. I think it's cool. I think it works out. We'll see how it goes. All right, number 3. You gain the powers of Quantum Leap and are about to enter one of these 3 bodies. Kevin Tsujihara in 2015. Ugh, that's disgusting. John Peters in 1997. That's weird. And Colin Trevorrow in 2015. Okay. If you had the chance to pick which individual you possess, what change do you make to DC or Star Wars? Let's see. Well, I think probably the biggest impact here that would make the landscape for fans easier, believe it or not, I'm going to go off book and say John Peters. Because here's the thing, right? In the case of Kevin Tsujihara, first of all, he's a disgusting POS, so I don't really want to inhabit that body. Because there's other shit that he did, in terms of the allegations and why he got fired that, pale in comparison to anything that he could have done to ruin DC at that point. At that point, you already had the producers, they were already being rinky-dink about it at that point. Colin Trevorrow, And as far as the whole Duel of the Fates thing, or whatever that goes, as far as like his deal with Star Wars, that again, that's the producers. That's them making decisions after the Last Jedi and whatnot. So whatever, they didn't go about it quite as copacetically as I felt that they should have. Even though I enjoy those movies and still live on the island of there are no bad Star Wars movies, subjectively speaking. But I would pick John Peters in 1997. Reason being is because I would want Superman Lives to actually happen. Like I would want Superman I'd want Nicolas Cage's Superman to actually see the light of day. And why is that? Because if we'd had another Superman actor back then it most certainly would have lessened the blow in terms of like the fan angst when Henry Cavill did it in 2013, and you wouldn't have had so much bullshit because it had been 19 flipping years and whatnot, and all the gaps. We wouldn't have had so many Superman gaps. I feel like that's the biggest injustice that Warner Brothers did to DC, was having so many gaps, having many huge gaps in between Superman movies and Superman versions on the big screen. And that's what I would have wanted. I would have wanted if I were going to be John Peters, and I don't know what other stuff he had, like if he had any other shit that he was doing in his personal life or whatever. I don't know about that. But from a producing standpoint, yeah, I feel like he would be the most important one, and that would be the biggest change, is enough with the damn Superman gaps. Fix that shit. Don't just focus so much on Batman. Have Superman Lives actually happen, right? Have Nicolas Cage actually be Superman, right? Like, go down that road, right? So that we can get into this habit earlier of different Superman interpretations on the big screen, and we don't have quite the fan wars that we've had over the last decade with respect to who's going to be Superman. And they're still raging, right? It's lessened a bit now because you're not hearing a whole lot from the Reeve people at all, even though Corran Sweat's version is not Christopher Reeve Redux. It just isn't. It really isn't. But you're hearing a lot less from them, and it's really just the Gunn haters and the Snyder haters fighting in that regard. And there shouldn't be any damn fighting. Like, who really fights in the Batman fandom between their versions of Batman? Do Bale fans really fight Affleck fans? Do any of them fight Pattinson fans? Like, do any of them fight Keaton fans? No, there's really no infighting because there's been that many different versions of Batman, like that many different interpretations spread out over a period of time, and everybody has their favorite, and that's just accepted. So if I were John Peters in 1997, that would be the biggest change that I would make, to get Superman to that point where everybody can have their own interpretation that they are, good with, and no damn infighting in that regard. Bring that level of copacetic peace. Like, hey, pick your Batman. Oh, mine's Bale, mine's Keaton, mine's Affleck, mine's Pattinson, right? And it'll be the same for this DCU Batman. Whoever this DCU Batman is going to be, it'll be the same thing. There will not be the fighting. Not to we'll have preferences, and we'll be like, oh, we don't like this, we don't like that, but it won't be the same as this, balls to the wall bullshit that we see on social media with Superman, right? So that would be my choice in that regard. And maybe that's a little off book, but hey, that's what I think would make the most impact out of the three people that you chose there. So here, let's get to your third email, which was a direct response. You called it a response to my most recent Flightcast episode, which had to do with some of the other things that I was talking about with respect to social media. You said, part one, I think your idea of a group Discord is an excellent idea. As a regular listener of your show for over half a decade at this point, it would be cool if we had some type of community where we all of as feedback listeners can interact with each other. Okay, I get the gist of what you were saying despite the grammar issues there. He says, I'll be honest, the only time I'm mostly on Threads is to see what you post. I don't give an F about random strangers' timelines anymore. It almost feels like Edge of Tomorrow or Groundhog Day. Same rehash post of something I've seen the day before, albeit slightly altered. Do I really want to spend the one life I have seeing the same thing over and over again? Nah, I'd just rather hang with you and a few others on Discord. This isn't just Threads, too. X, Facebook, Reddit just feels like an underground echo chamber of recycling the same shit every day. If I do continue to be online, this seems like the more sane route, right? Yeah, this is where I'm at. Like, we are like in lockstep with respect to this mindset. This is what leads me to believe that this may indeed be the direction that we should go in with respect to this. And thank you for including your information for Discord. He says, I primarily use Discord for gaming, in particular Nintendo and Pokemon Go groups. The wrestling roleplay I failed to rejoin ended. The guy in charge had personal life stuff, so we're trying to start a new campaign with a new guy in charge, and I can join this time around. But I have also used Discord to talk to strangers about mental health. Therapy and ChatGPT that tried to emulate Frasier is nice and all, but talking in a group setting might be the way to go. Happy to share my Discord info with anyone who wishes to email me, Jonathan Rossler at gmail.com or ZRJRow, ZRJAYROW at gmail.com. I'm guessing you use at the Flightcast as your name? I think so. I got to double check. I'm not 100% certain which email address I've used for that. Because I don't log in every time. It's just already logged in when I open the app, whether it's on my phone or whether it's on my computer, because I get notifications all the time, especially with respect to Star Trek Fleet Command, the game that I play like on mobile. So I'll have to end the Steelbook Discord for sure. So I'll have to double check that one. I think so though. All right, part 2. Speaking of Hitchcock, it's funny you mentioned Psycho. A month ago, I'm guessing he said a month ago, Tammy had her first time watching Psycho in a theater, and it was also her first time seeing a black and white film. This was the screening that John Campea was at. Okay. If you ever visit the Bay Area again, Tam and I would like to show you Anshuda Bodega Bay where they shot the birds. Oh, okay. The rural town of Bodega, which is more like a village, dedicates the town to Hitchcock, and Bodega Bay is beautiful. Also, Hitchcock shot a movie out north in Santa Rosa called Shadow of a Doing, one of his earlier films. Funny enough, the plot also involves an antagonist starting his journey on a train, like strangers on a train. Shadow of a Doubt is what he meant to say, because he sent an email with the correction there later. Sorry, I forgot to read that. But okay, that's the crazy thing too, is like after watching the birds and realizing, oh, Bodega Bay, like I didn't realize that Bodega Bay was a real place, and that it's out by like San Francisco. It's like, wow, if I had like watched that movie before we went out there, that would have been one of the places I would have wanted to check out. I don't know that we would have gotten there because we weren't there for quite that long to really, like have a free day to like go and see as much as we wanted to see. But if we ever head back out there, which I would like to at some point, yeah, I would want to check out Bodega Bay and like see exactly where all that was. That would be really cool for sure. So we'll have to look into that at some point, John. But thank you as always for the feedback, good sir. Indeed, greatly appreciated. And I will keep you and everybody else posted on the Discord idea. Let's see what everybody else has to say if anybody else chimes in on the Discord idea, because this isn't the first time I brought this up. But it's definitely something that I am thinking about and giving some serious consideration to right now. All right, next up, let's hear from Sam Otten, who sends in an email this week just titled Hitch. Oh, I wonder what this is about. He says, Ray, glad to hear that you enjoyed the 1960 classic version of Psycho. I appreciate your ability to judge it based on its own context, and I do really enjoy the character work, the twists and turns, the Herman score, and the strong sense of place with the iconic house and motel. I also read the book, and a big difference is that Norman Bates in the novel is an overweight kind of pasty blonde guy, whereas the movie made him slender and dark-haired. I think it actually works better in the film, he says, because a good-looking guy who is mentally unwell and too connected to his mother is somehow more disturbing to me than some poor unfortunate guy who is clearly an undesirable. I think I would agree with that. I think I would indeed agree with that. And I have not read the book, but it's an intriguing detail. He says, with regard to my favorite Hitchcock film, Dial M for Murder, I mentioned that it was a How Catchem. Just to explain that quickly, a How Catchem is a different angle on the typical crime story. The most common approach is a whodunit, where the audience is introduced to a crime, but they don't know who committed it. And so throughout the story, the audience is trying to figure out who the real criminal is. The rising action can happen because there are various suspects and some red herrings along the way. The classic whodunit might even bring various suspects together for a climactic scene at the end when the real culprit is finally revealed. But a How Catchem is entirely different. In this type of story, the audience sees the crime being committed, and they completely know who really did the crime right from the start. But the main characters do not know who the criminal is, and the crime is often carried out so expertly that it seems like they might actually get away with it. So the suspense comes from wondering, how will the good guys actually catch this criminal? The rising action comes from the main characters finding some clues and maybe getting close to figuring it out, but then the criminal is able to adjust or slip away in some way so that it still seems like they might get off, or someone else might take the fall for them. Then in the climax, there is some key slip up by the criminal, or there's some really artful maneuver by the main characters to finally catch the bad guy. He says Dial M for Murder is a really good example of the How Catchem template, and probably the most famous series that uses this format is Columbo. It seems like the crime is so well planned that Columbo will not be able to solve it, but somehow he always manages to in the end. Now I'm wondering, okay, I'm racking my brain here, what movies have I seen that would qualify as a How Catchem? Okay, this is interesting because Google is suggesting that the usual suspects is a how catch 'em, and I think that's technically true, isn't it? I mean, I know that we are like trying to determine, I guess, I don't know, the true identity of Kaiser Soze, but like that's really the only mystery. We know that it's not any of the others, right? Or at least we think we do. Like it's not really like we're presented suspects and we don't know who did the crime. No, we know who did the crime, and we're trying to find out who he actually is. And there is a red herring that throws us off in the direction of one person, and then it turns out to be somebody else in one of the greatest twist endings I've ever seen. But yeah, I think that would count, wouldn't it? Perhaps. Maybe after I watch Dial M for Murder, I'll get a better idea of this. But it's also, it didn't say this, but it presented the picture, like it's claiming that Knives Out is also a how catch 'em. I don't know. Because I feel like that's more of a whodunit. I feel like the whole point of Benoit Blanc is whodunit, like the whole idea of that, right? But it's also saying like it didn't say this, but it's got a picture of Catch Me If You Can, which yeah, that's also, and this is what I was thinking about. Can a how catch 'em also include films where we know who did it, and it's like, okay, how are they going to get caught, like procedurally in that regard, not in terms of like, is that the definition of what you're talking about? So it Catch Me If You Can absolutely count as that, where we know it's Frank, and he's running around, doctor, lawyer, Lutheran, and how is Frank going to catch him? How is this all going to end? Would that be an idea of a how catch him? Because if that's the case, then yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. It's one of my favorites, actually. So, okay. All right. So, there we go. The difference between a whodunit and a how catch 'em. Dial M for Murder is definitely on my list as far as further Hitch films that I am going to watch. It may not be the next one that I watch, but definitely on the list of ones that I'm going to watch. And for the record, Sam, I've also seen The Birds because I watched The Birds the other night for the end of Friday Flight, or for Flight Fright, pardon me. Not Friday Flight. Flight Fright, my spooky season show that I was doing specifically for the final week of Halloween, where I literally reviewed 7 spooky season movies on Patreon over the span of about a week and a half. And I finished with some doozies, The Birds being one of them. So I've now seen 2 Hitch movies, and I actually have another one that I blind bought in my collection because it was really cheap. It was $14.99, that Steelbook was. And I will probably be doing a flight review episode of that in the not too distant future at some point. So just throwing that out there. But it is not Dial M for Murder. It is a different one that I've heard of and was never really on my radar, but definitely is one that I will be looking forward to watching and reviewing because it's got a couple of actors in it that I've never seen. They're big time actor pairing that I've never seen. I've actually seen a movie of these people in it before from way back when in the 50s and 60s. So yeah, that'll be intriguing. So cool. He says, "Oh, just one more thing. I heard your episode with the stats about viewership. I'm not surprised that YouTube is the king. YouTube is so expansive and so easy to use, where you can see the recent postings but also very easily search all kinds of past content. And it really does have content on almost any topic you can think of. Plus, it has lots of historical stuff digitized and available for viewing, like old commercials, old film clips, sports highlights, and so much more." Yes, I've gone down so many rabbit holes of everything that you just listed. Old commercials, old film clips, sports highlights. You know what? Okay. Here, you brought up old commercials, so I'm going to talk about this real quick and then get to your question. I might end up answering your question before I even say it out loud here, Sam. But there is this candy commercial from the 80s that what happened was my dad, way back when, and he's probably still got this tape somewhere in the basement of his house. Way back when, he would randomly tape like Saturday morning cartoons for me. And one day he threw the tape in and he randomly recorded all of ABC Saturday morning cartoons, like the whole lineup for a day, right? It was Little Clowns of Happy Town, Pound Puppies, My Pet Monster. I think there was one or two others. But at any rate, he just let the tape roll, which meant that he recorded all of the commercials. And there was this like commercial for a candy called Tutti Fruits, and it had this jingle, and it was like this, not creepy, but it was like this stop motion, like claymation, like, Tutti Fruits, like, chewy on the outside, soft on the inside, right? Because 2 fruits are more fun than 1, right? I have been searching for that commercial for years. And a few weeks ago, I finally found it. I finally found it on YouTube. And the reason I couldn't find it is one, I didn't know it was made by Sunkist, and two, I was spelling Tootie wrong. I kept typing like Tooty or Tootie. No, what I should have been typing, what it was actually called was TWO T, because it was part of the name. Like, oh, it's two fruits in one, two tea fruits, right? Which didn't remember that as a kid at all. I just remember the jingle, and I mean, this thing was playing in my head. Like, I can't forget it. It's just stuck in my brain, and I'm like, I will never be able to forget how this sounded, what this commercial was like. Where can I find it? And I don't know how I found it. I was just randomly going through. I was just one night I went on an obsessive search, and it finally yielded results. I've been looking for this damn commercial for years, and somebody in the annals of YouTube had it. And oh, it was so satisfying to find that commercial again. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I was this close to being like, okay, next time I'm at my mom and dad's house, I got to find this video because I'll be able to find it. We got to put it in the VHS. I got to watch it. I got to find out what the hell this commercial was. Because what am I saying wrong? What am I typing wrong? Unfortunately, I didn't have to do that because somebody on YouTube had already done that. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And like you said, old film clips, sports highlights. There's a dude named Awood40. All he does is post Red Wings highlights. And I've watched hours of old Detroit Red Wings highlights. And he updates it too, like even with the new stuff. So like it's yeah, there's a plethora of content on YouTube. So here we go. This leads him to his question, which is, if the entire internet was going to be deleted, but we could only save 3 websites, what would you choose? He says, I've thought about this before just as a hypothetical situation, and my first 2 are definitely YouTube and Wikipedia. He says YouTube for music, movies, TV episodes, cultural moments, comedy, DIY videos, and so much more. And then Wikipedia for a written record of history, science, key people, sports, movie synopses, and lots of good stuff. But I don't really know what number 3 would be. What do you think? Sam also says, and before people slam Wikipedia, I just want to say that its broad expansiveness more than makes up for it being somewhat untrustworthy because of rogue editing. There was an analysis done years ago, and the researchers found that Wikipedia wasn't perfect, but it was just as accurate as other encyclopedias from back in the day, because it's important to remember that traditional encyclopedias also have errors and biases. But where Wikipedia really wins out is that it has much more content than the traditional encyclopedias, and I would definitely take Wikipedia over Elon Musk's new Grokpedia, or whatever that new thing is supposed to be. Thanks, Sam Otten. First of all, Sam, I 1,000% agree with you on the Wikipedia thing, because here's the thing. People want to point out the rogue editing issues and like, oh, you can't trust it. And yes, academically speaking, you cannot cite it, and nor should you be able to, because it really does end up being, like you said, an encyclopedia, which encyclopedias are essentially content aggregators. But what Wikipedia does do, if you're a responsible and rational individual, is it provides you the link to the source of where it got the information from in the first place. And that's what you go to. That's what you look at, and that's what you cite when you're doing anything, any type of research or whatnot, right? It's all there for you. So yeah, Wikipedia is good for assembling that in that regard. So yeah, I'm with you. People that drop trowel on Wikipedia, they're just hitting the easy button, and they're going with, you know, the flavor of the month, as far as, oh, this is why this isn't trustworthy, that's why that's not trustworthy. You got to be able to trust some sources, right? And you can trust Wikipedia as long as you use it responsibly in that regard and follow the links that it's actually pointing to for whatever it is that you're researching. Like you said, with an encyclopedia, it's basically a digital encyclopedia. So I'm with you on that. And I agree with you on both of your websites as far as YouTube and Wikipedia. As far as a third website to save along with that, here, give me one moment and let me scan through some. I will tell you this, it won't be social media. None of the social media, none of them. Get rid of all of them. I don't need any of them. I would not save any one of them. If they all blow up, they all blow up. Because it just, as we were saying, as I've been talking about, even with the good, as far as, you know, some of the communication, some of the rational communication that we have, there's just too much nonsense. There's too much regurgitation of bullshit with social media. So no, I wouldn't save any of them. I tell you what, Sam, I don't necessarily want to, I guess for lack of being able to point to a particular website that would do this, I would say Pluto. Here's why I say that. What I really am looking at is some website, that third website, right? We've got YouTube for, you know, all the archival video and whatnot, and the different DIYs and stuff like that, like people's own networks and homemade stuff and stuff like that, right? And then we have Wikipedia for like all of the, reference of information, right? I think we still need something for some form of live television or at least programming in that regard, like television in that sense. And I would say really what I want would be a free ad supported television app, and there's a couple of them. The best one, I would say subjectively at this point, is Pluto. It is owned by Paramount, so I mean that's the tricky part, is it's got to still be owned by a corporation. That's the tricky part with any of these, right? Because whether it's YouTube owned by Google or whether it's Wikipedia, I don't even know like how. I mean that's independently funded, is it not? Right? But either way, like yeah, that would be my answer for a third website, is probably Pluto or some the best fast app, the best free ad supported television app. That would be my third choice, because we would need something like that for like live broadcasts and whatnot over the internet. So yeah, that's what I would say as far as those would be my picks for the three websites in that regard. So hope that answers the question. I think it does pretty solidly. That's a great question. Love that. Thank you as always for the feedback, Sam. It is indeed greatly appreciated. All right, now let's check in with Mr. Amr Osama. He returns to the feedback circle this week with an email titled From Hollywood Changes to Detective Mysteries, Alternate Histories, and The Final Frontier. All right, sit back, break open the popcorn. Let's hear what Amr has to say this week. He says, Hey Ray, I hope you're doing well and in good health and spirits, and the same goes for everyone tuning in. Hanging in there, Amr. Hope you're doing the same. He says, First off, I just want to thank you for the kind words in your last reply. I really took them to heart. Your words, it doesn't matter when you get there, what matters is that you do, and life isn't a race but a marathon, genuinely stuck with me and helped shift my mindset. I feel much better now than I did last time around. Talking and writing about everything that was going on definitely helped too, so again, thank you. No problem, Amr, definitely. However I can assist, I'm glad that you did take that to heart and recognize that, yeah, the pressure that we put on ourselves to get through, get a degree and go through an institution of higher learning is just wholly unnecessary. And that was something that I learned through experience, right? Not only my experience, but also through other people's experience, classmates and whatnot. So yeah, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Thank you for the kind sentiment with respect to that. He says, I know I've been a bit absent again, but that's mainly been because I haven't watched much Star Trek lately to give updates on. I've been preoccupied with a few other shows that really hook me. Don't get me wrong, Star Trek is great, but I don't know if you ever get this too. When I watch too much of one really good thing, I tend to get a bit desensitized to it and need to take a break. A kind of palate cleanser, you could say, before diving back in refreshed. Maybe it's just me, but that's what happened this time. No, I could feel that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, you gotta change things up. Sometimes you can only, as much as I love Star Trek, you can only watch that much of Pluto TV on repeat on a regular basis before you want to see something else. And in my case, I got sitcoms, I got sports, I got so many other things that I can go to that aren't Star Trek. So I have a myriad of choices, and definitely they're kind of necessary. I like variety being the spice of life for that. So I got you on that. He says, so in this absolutely Dorsey-sized email, I'll be talking about a few of the other shows I've been watching lately, and of course, some Star Trek as well. I won't be delving into spoiler territory for the other shows, but I will go in depth for the Star Trek section. All right, well, here we go. He says, I also wanted to touch a bit on the ongoing sale of Warner Brothers Discovery. I've listened to your recent FLITEcast episodes about it, and I completely agree with your take. A lot of people seem to think this sale would somehow derail James Gunn's plans for DC Studios, while the Snyder cultists are clutching their pearls and holding on to the delusion that a sale, whether to Paramount or Universal, would restore the Snyderverse. Honestly, it's pretty ridiculous. My younger brother, he says, even sent me a Discussing Films tweet about the sale. It had the WB and DC logos, so he sent it to me because DC is involved. He followed it with that Spider-Man gif of Green Goblin saying, oh, before getting impaled by his glider. Mind you, he's 14, he doesn't know any better, but my reply was short and simple. Why do you think studios want to buy Warner Brothers? It's because of DC and, of course, HBO. He simply said, oh yeah, and then we both moved on. No company would bid millions upon millions of dollars for a failing division or a take on a financial burden. They see value in DC and Warner Brothers in general, so not a lost cause. And it's not just DC either, he says. Warner Brothers has a treasure trove of IPs, from HBO to their massive film and TV library. HBO alone is worth God knows how much. It's one of the richest content vaults in Hollywood, and that's exactly why everyone's eager to get a piece of it. So far, Amr, I agree with 100% of everything that you're saying, 1,000% of everything that you're saying. And yeah, a lot of people are forgetting that whoever ends up buying Warner Brothers Discovery will be taking on that $35 billion of financial burden, at least in that regard. So yeah, you better see some value in what they already have in place as opposed to just wanting to change things up and blow everything up for some new direction and whatnot. But here, this next paragraph is the big one. You said there's also been some concern about Paramount potentially buying Warner Brothers because its owner is close with the current White House administration. I get where that worry comes from, but like you said, the color green tends to matter a lot more than red or blue. Not tends to, does matter more than red or blue for sure. Also, Zaslav, he says, the current CEO of Warner Brothers also shares the current administration's views, correct? He didn't stop Gunn from making Superman, quote, woke, emphasis on the quotations. At the end of the day, it's the dollar that drives these studio executives more than anything else. I don't see them throwing away a multi-billion-dollar opportunity just to cater to political ideology. Then again, who knows? Stranger things have definitely happened. LOL. I also want to point this out, too. You know, Bob Iger showed his true colors last year during the strikes. He is a one percenter that has way much in common, way much more in common with David Zaslav and David Ellison than any of us in that regard, right? He's in charge of Disney. And remember, for a long time, he allowed the Ike Perlmutter nonsense to occur, and then Ike Perlmutter left, and even so, it was still, we didn't get Black Panther until movie 18, we didn't get Captain Marvel until movie, 2021. Perhaps that wasn't all Ike Perlmutter. As much as Marvel fans want to completely pin that on him, perhaps it wasn't all him. Perhaps Iger was also reluctant to do that in that regard. Because seriously, the one percenters are way more in tune with each other and they're way closer to the White House administration than they are to us. So for people that are concerned, again, this is already owned. The studios are already owned by these individuals, by these people that are close to these political ideologies. So this worry, this knee-jerk worry, even though I do get it, is still silly in my opinion, right? Like I understand why so many crazy things have happened just this year alone that you would think, well, here's another crazy thing that happened. But the reality of the situation is it's all about the money. And whatever brings in the masses, whether they agree with it or not, they're going to go with it. And you know what? It gives Fox News and other outlets a headline to go, hey, Superman is super woke. And it's more attention, which can only mean more dollars in the pocket of David Zaslav or Ellison or whoever else it is in that regard. That's how they look at it. That's seriously how they look at it. It's audience manipulation in that regard. Seriously. So, yeah, I really think people are just I get the paranoia, but they're way too paranoid in an illogical sense, because they're using their emotions instead of their logic to focus on this in that regard. So, but you're right, stranger things have definitely happened. He says, so far, it seems that Paramount and NBC Universal are the current top bidders. I haven't heard of any other studios making moves yet, not Disney, Netflix, Amazon, or even Apple TV+. Well, Netflix allegedly may be preparing some type of bid. I definitely don't want to see that happen. Not because I dislike Netflix, but because I don't want to see all physical media and marketing go out the window for DC. Because Netflix doesn't care about physical media and they don't have a clue how to market shit. They really they have marketing, like brand marketing, they're not good at. Netflix is not good at brand marketing. They just are not. Everything is flash in the pan with them. That's why they have so many things that last a couple of seasons and then they move on to the next thing, right? That's why Stranger Things is taking forever because they haven't marketed that properly. And that's why Squid Game, tends to be, here and there. That's why Queen's Gambit was here and there. Black Mirror was here and there, right? They don't have consistency in terms of building a brand. And that's a problem. I don't want them. I definitely don't want that to happen. Certainly not. I would much rather see one of the other studios, Paramount or Universal, get it in that regard. And if it was Amazon or Apple TV Plus, they understand brand building for sure with their products. So yeah, they'd be fine as well. So yeah, hopefully what we're hearing about with Netflix does not come to pass in that regard. But Amr says, the one studio I'm genuinely surprised not to see involved at all is Sony Columbia Pictures. Maybe there's a reason for that, and of course I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, Ray. From what I know, Columbia Pictures is still one of Hollywood's major players. Maybe Sony's reasoning is similar to Apple's. Both are primarily tech companies rather than fully dedicated film and television studios. Still, I would have thought Sony might at least try, especially considering how valuable Warner Brothers' catalog would be for Columbia. Not to mention, Warner Brothers also has Warner Brothers Games, and with that, comes the DC video game licenses. You'd think that alone would pique Sony's interest since it would make a great addition to their ever-growing lineup of studios under PlayStation. The idea of PlayStation exclusive DC games isn't far-fetched either. Just look at the Spider-Man titles and the upcoming Wolverine game. Granted, exclusivity has started to blur in recent years, he says, with PlayStation exclusives making their way to PC and even Halo now coming to PlayStation, something that would have been unthinkable not long ago. Sure, Sony could try to buy Warner Brothers games separately, he says, but I doubt anyone in their right mind would let that go. And if anyone's wondering why a company would buy an entire studio for one particular thing, I'd point them straight to Disney's purchase of Fox, just to get the X-Men film rights. Well, maybe not 100% the driving force for the purchase. No, it wasn't, Amr. Absolutely not. Fans want to believe that Disney bought Fox to get X-Men? No, absolutely not. No. It was several. It was X-Men. It was Fantastic Four. It was everything under that purview, right? Like all of the Marvel licenses under that. It certainly was not X-Men only that they want, and plus the library, because they wanted sole control of Hulu, and they made a deal with Comcast to buy that last 30%, but they wanted to bolster that content library, if you will, by adding Fox's library to the Disney library, which they have done on Hulu and also on Disney Plus with the parental advisories and the parental controls and whatnot that were added some years ago as well. So yeah, it was certainly not X-Men driven in that decision. He says, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how everything turns out. The sale isn't just about what happens to DC. It could reshape the entire landscape of Hollywood. The number of major studio players would shrink even further, and the implications of that could be huge. We're talking about potential job losses, reduced competition, and a ripple effect that could touch every corner of the industry. It's a fascinating, honestly, a moment to watch unfold. All right, so let me comment, because I do have an opinion about the Sony thing. And here's the deal. I understand why Sony hasn't tried for it. One, they don't have the cash. They don't. They do not have the cash. And you can look at their market value and go, well, their market value isn't that far off from Paramount or NBC Universal. Well, the problem is they're not owned by billionaires. Go look at how much the Ellisons are worth. They would be fronting the deal with their own cash if they made it happen in that regard, right? And so in their case, they don't have the cash to do it, number one. Number two, they've already got the Spider-Man deal, and they are clinging to that. I mean, they are holding on to that like a binky. They will not let Marvel Studios get a hold of that. Marvel Studios will have to continue dealing with them to make anything Spider-Man related whatsoever. We know this. They dictate what they can do in the MCU with that character, right? Brand New Day is only happening because Sony says so in that regard. They're fine. With doing what they're doing, they're not worried about it. And the other part of that is the tech portion of this in that regard. So they're not in the same position as an Apple or an Amazon. Apple, they first of all have the money to spend $1 billion a year on content purely for the purpose of marketing people to buy iPhones. That's why Slow Horses and Foundation and The Morning Show exist and get all the money that they get, because they want people to buy iPhones and iPads and iMacs to watch those shows, right? That's the gateway for it. They are a tech company, and their first industry is tech. Their second industry is support and helping the tech. Like all the when you go to the Genius Bar and talk to the people and say, hey, I'm having trouble with my phone, I'm having trouble with this, I'm having trouble with that. That's their second industry. I know this because I once interviewed. Actually, I interviewed with Apple twice years ago to potentially work for them way back in the day. This is back when I was still working retail and I wanted to get out of GameStop in that regard, right? So they said this in that regard. So what they're doing, spending $1 billion a year on content, which is what they spent. They spent $1 billion on content last year because they made $9.5 billion last year. They brought that much in. They can afford that because they have that kind of market cap. They have that kind of space. They are a whale. Amazon is also a whale in that regard. And maybe they don't regard content quite as highly as Apple does, but it's not that far off. Come on. People love The Boys. People love The Man in the High Castle. People love The Marvelous Miss Maisel. People love Invincible, right? And for the people that enjoy Rings of Power and didn't have their other, fan bullshit wrapped around it, they appreciated that and enjoyed that as well, right? So they're whales. Sony's nowhere near that capability in that regard. They just aren't. And they're also not hitched. They don't have a streamer that they're hitched to, right? Like they don't have a streaming service of their own. Paramount has Paramount Plus. Universal has Peacock. Those are streaming services that they own that they want to expand the libraries for. And both of them would love to add, as you said, Warner Brothers library to either of their streaming apps. Because the only streamer that has a larger library than Warner Brothers is Netflix. And that's only because they spent 5 to 10 years making and adding, everything, like their own original content to it. Is it subjectively on the same level as the Warner Brothers library? No, absolutely not. The Warner Brothers library is vastly superior, subjectively speaking. And yeah, Paramount would love to add that to their library. Universal would love to add that to their library. Sony doesn't have one to add to. Sony's a nomad in this regard. And right now they're content on being a nomad. So I hear you with respect to the video game stuff. But all of that is also, like you said, the exclusivity is becoming a wash in the first place anyway. So I don't think that deal would happen either. I think, and in particular, this is for Warner Brothers Discovery. This is for the streamers and studios, and also the Discovery Global stuff. Like this is to get the studios, and if you want the whole thing, if you get it before they split up in April, you get the whole thing. You get the streamers and studios, and you get CNN, you get TNT, you get TBS, and all that, right? Like, that's what all this is about. Does Sony want all of that? Does Sony have the infrastructure to deal with all of that? No, they do not. So I don't think I'm not surprised at all they're not interested. They're in a different position than any of these other studios with respect to that. A very different position. And you know what? They're fine hanging on to the Spider-Man rights because that brings them tons of money, and whatnot, merchandising, games as well, game licensing, and the movies. They're going to make money off a Brand New Day. They are, because Spider-Man is a money printer, just like Batman in that regard, right? So Sony's fine. They don't need to. I'm not surprised at all they're not making a play for this, because they are nowhere near the position of any of these other studios in that regard. They're not a whale. They don't have Apple or Amazon money, and they do not have a streaming app of their own that they desperately need content for, that they would like to expand content for in that regard. So they don't have the obligations. They don't have the obligations or the money that either of these other studios do. So that's just the long and short of it, to be honest with you. But we'll see what happens. I doubt that they're going to come in with a last second bid. I think it's either going to be Paramount or Universal, and hopefully not Netflix. I'll say that. So he says, anyway, on a lighter note, while all this real-world studio drama plays out, I've been diving into some really interesting shows lately that I can't wait to talk about. These have kept me busy during my little Star Trek break, and they've been great palate cleansers before I jump back into the final frontier. Up first, Department Q. I recently finished watching the Netflix original series Department Q. Don't worry, I won't be diving into spoiler territory here, just sharing a few of my general thoughts on the show. If you're in the mood for some UK TV, this might be the show for you, he says. I'll admit I haven't seen much British television myself, but the few that I've watched I've really enjoyed. There's The IT Crowd, a comedy that had me laughing out loud several times. It's a short one, as is typical of British TV, with just 6 episodes per season and around 3 or 4 seasons in total. I have seen it. It is funny. I'm with you. Moss is my favorite character. Richard Iodele, I hope I pronounced that name right. I probably didn't, but he's awesome. Anyway, then there's Phoebe Waller-Bridge's Fleabag, he says, a fantastic dramedy that runs for only 2 seasons, each just 6 half-hour episodes long. Definitely one of those shows you can easily binge in a single day. There was also Sherlock, the modern-day take on the iconic detective played here by Benedict Cumberbatch, which reimagines what Sherlock Holmes might be like if he lived today instead of in the 1800s. Saw the first 3 seasons, did not watch the 4th, and what I believe was the last season, if I'm not mistaken. Excellent show. 90-minute movies. Each of those episodes, it was 3 episodes a season, 90-minute movies. It was fantastic, though, really good. Which brings me to Department Q, he says. It's a detective mystery thriller, a slow burn one, starring Matthew Goode, who you might know from The Crown or as Ozymandias in Zack Snyder's adaptation of the Alan Moore comic Watchmen. He's been in many other things as well, but yes, those 2 for sure, Amr. The series follows a detective, he says, who becomes head of a new department within the Edinburgh Police, tasked with reopening and solving the city's many unsolved or cold cases. The show's title is an inside joke in the show, where this new department is located in the police's old shower quarters in the building's basement. Okay. Quarters. Q. Gotcha. The show is 9 episodes long, with each episode running a little over 50 minutes. It's really good, he says. Like I said, it's a very slow burn mystery, so it takes a while for everything to kick into place. But the first episode does something very cool with timelines that I won't spoil. It genuinely caught me off guard. As with most slow burn stories, it might feel deliberately paced at first, but once you settle into the rhythm, you'll find yourself deeply invested. It's the kind of slow pacing that takes its time to develop, but never drags to the point of boredom. The cold case at the heart of the season revolves around the mysterious disappearance of a female lawyer prosecutor who has been missing for 4 years. The show's tone and mood are reminiscent of David Fincher's Seven, dark, atmospheric, and quietly haunting. So if you like that film, you'll probably find a lot to love here. I own that film, so you're saying some good things here. You're speaking my language on this one. He says beyond the central mystery, the series is also very character driven. Our main protagonist, DCI Karl Mork, played by Good, is joined by Akram Salim, a Syrian immigrant who used to be a police officer back home and dreams of becoming one again in the UK, but is unable to. He's a really interesting character, and I found him especially engaging. Maybe it's the Arab Muslim representation that drew me to him. It's rare to see it handled well and not filled with stereotypes. Going on about of a tangent, the better Muslim representation I've seen so far in Hollywood is still Ms. Marvel, and for Arab and Egyptian representation, there's also Moon Knight, both Marvel shows, surprisingly enough. The bar for good representation has been set so low that when a show does it right, it really stands out. In Moon Knight's case, it was even refreshing to see Cairo not drenched in that generic yellow filter Hollywood always uses. Yeah, I'm with you on this tangent. In fact, Moon Knight is one of my favorite Marvel shows. That's why I own it. I mean, I own all the Marvel shows in Glorious Steelbook. Why they have not released Ms. Marvel yet? Travesty. Ridiculous. Travis Shamockery. Release Ms. Marvel. Release Ms. Marvel in 4K Blu-ray in Steelbook immediately. That should be the next wave. They're taking forever, Disney. Get your next wave of MCU shows out there. Get Ms. Marvel out there. Do it. Absolutely. You know what? Pair it with Daredevil Born Again. Whatever. I don't care. But just do it. Because, yes, I'm with you. The representation matters is strong with both Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel. And I hear you. The bar is low. And as low as it can be for black people, sometimes I imagine it can be even lower for, like you said, Arab Muslim representation as well. Because they love putting stereotypes. The white people that write these shows and are in charge of these studios love putting every stereotype in the book that they think is real, but it's not. And they don't realize, or they don't care, worse, about how stereotypical it looks. Like you said, the same generic yellow filter that Hollywood always uses for Cairo. Yeah, the same filter that was used in Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is one of my favorite movies. It's like my favorite Indiana Jones film, and it's one of my favorite movies of all time, but it was made in 1981. And yeah, there's probably a good amount of stereotypes in there that I'm not even aware of in that regard. But yeah, I hear you with respect to the stereotypical representation, and it's awesome when it is done very well. So it sounds like it's being done very well so far in Department Q, so that's good. He says alongside Mork and Salim is DC Rose Dixon, among many other well-written and engaging characters who are easy to get attached to. I'd heard a lot of good things about Department Q, he says, the acting, writing, and cinematography, but I hesitated to start it at first, mainly because, well, it's a Netflix original, and Netflix doesn't exactly have the best track record when it comes to renewing its shows. I didn't want to get invested into something that ends on a cliffhanger only to be canceled months later. That is absolutely understandable, especially with Netflix. All the more reason I don't want them anywhere near buying Warner Brothers. But at any rate, he says, thankfully, Season 2 is already in production and expected to come out sometime next year. I didn't know that before I started watching, but what ultimately convinced me was the strong reception the show got, and more importantly, finding out that one of its creators is Scott Frank, the same mind behind The Queen's Gambit starring Anya Taylor-Joy, which I loved when it came out. He's also the screenwriter behind both of James Mangold's Wolverine films, The Wolverine and Logan, which made me even more intrigued to check Department Q out. Okay, I'm hearing nothing but great, like as far as all the details with respect to this, so alright, might have to add Department Q to the list. The list is too long, there's too much shit to watch. He says, as with any detective or mystery story, its main job is to keep you guessing and make you feel like you're piecing the puzzle together alongside the characters. Department Q does that exceptionally well. It constantly keeps you theorizing, second-guessing, and trying to figure out what really happened. If you're up for an engaging detective story and some well-made British TV, I highly recommend checking this one out. All right, so that's Department Q. Big, huge vote of confidence for that show. He says another show I've watched recently is The Plot Against America. I've heard about this show since it came out back in 2020, but never got around to watching it until now. It's an HBO miniseries based on the book of the same name by Philip Roth. The story takes place in an alternate version of American history where the famous aviator Charles Lindbergh becomes president instead of Franklin D. Roosevelt, who in our world would have been running for a third term. What follows is a chilling portrait of an America that slowly, and perhaps faster than anyone expects, turns toward fascism. Now, regardless of what's happening in the real world today, he says, that's not what drew me to the show. What really drew me in was the alternate history concept itself. I love alternate history stories. When done well, they can open up some incredibly creative and thought-provoking what-if scenarios. The Plot Against America is one of two shows I'll be discussing here that explores that kind of premise. He says the series is told from the perspective of a working-class Jewish family, the Levines, who witnessed the political rise of Lindbergh and the wave of anti-Semitism and xenophobia that follows. I'm not especially knowledgeable about American history, but from what I've learned, the real Charles Lindbergh actually considered running for president to prevent the U.S. from entering World War II. This show explores what might have happened if he had run and won. So while it might have had an even deeper impact for American audiences, I still found its alternate history storytelling fascinating. I won't delve deeper into this show either. It's only 6 episodes long with each running around an hour. One of the show's creators is David Simon, who also created The Wire, oh boy. If that show is anything like The Plot Against America, quality-wise, then it might just be bumped up on my ever-growing list of shows to watch. If you're also a fan of alternate history and what-if stories, then this is another show I definitely recommend. It's more than just an alternate history series, it's a deeply human story told through a chillingly plausible lens. I have heard the exact same descriptors about The Man in the High Castle, which is another alternate history about Nazis, winning the war, if I'm not mistaken. That was on Amazon many years ago. But yeah, David Simon, The Wire. Let me put it this way, Amr. The Wire, I've only seen the first season of The Wire, and I need to watch the other 4. But The Wire is considered one of the greatest television shows made in the last 30 years. Seriously, it's ranked that highly. We're talking like Vince Gilligan and Breaking Bad, like, were inspired by The Wire, right? And people love that show, right? The Wire is like on a mountaintop. A lot of people's Mount Rushmores as far as like great, incredible television, right? Many people consider it HBO's best show, and that is saying something considering the wealth of shows that HBO has given us over the last 30, 40 years. So keep that in mind. If David Simon is involved in this, then yeah, all right. Let's see. The Plot Against America. I've heard of this one. Okay. I don't know when the hell I'm going to watch all this shit, but all right. A rousing a vote of confidence for that particular show. Cool. Then he says, and now the last show that I watched, or more accurately, am currently watching, is For All Mankind. Yeah, this one's already on my list for a couple of reasons. Let's see if you bring up one of the big ones. He says this is the other alternate history series I mentioned earlier. It's an Apple TV Plus original starring Joel Kinnaman. It currently has 4 seasons with Eddie Gathegi joining in the 3rd. Each season is running 10 episodes with a 5th season already on the way. It's still going? For All Mankind is still going? Okay. All right. He says the show explores a reality where the famous space race never ended. The point of divergence from our own history is 1969, when it was the Soviet Roscosmos, not the U.S. NASA, that became the first to land on the moon. This one change sets off a fascinating chain reaction, creating a world where the space race continues indefinitely and space innovation rapidly accelerates technological progress. Imagine electric cars becoming prominent as they are now, but in the 80s, or having flat-screen TV in the 90s and video chatting. Again, I'll stay away from spoilers, he says, but what makes For All Mankind especially interesting is how it jumps through decades. Each season is set in a different era. The first covers 1969 and 1973, the second picks up in an alternate 1983, and the third moves into an alternate 1990, with the fourth, I believe, will be in the 2000s. I'm currently midway through the 3rd season, and I'm really impressed with how the show handles its evolving timeline and historical shifts. The alternate history details are what make the show stand out, he says. For example, in the first season, Nixon is still president as expected, but he loses re-election to Ted Kennedy in the 70s. Watergate still happens. But since Nixon never serves a second term, he doesn't need to resign. In fact, it's what causes the loss of his re-election. In the 2nd season, Reagan is president, but George H.W. Bush isn't his vice president, a small but intriguing divergence that hints at how differently this world has evolved. In the 3rd season, the differences are even more pronounced. Without getting into spoiler territory for certain characters, he says, I'll just say that the USSR doesn't collapse in 1991 as it did in our world. It's actually stronger than ever. Because in this alternate timeline, There's no Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in the 80s, a change that has very strong implications. In real-world history, that invasion led to the rise of the Mujahideen, which eventually contributed to the formation of extremist groups like Al-Qaeda. Without that chain of events, it's entirely possible that something like 9/11 might never have happened in this universe. On top of that, since the invasion was one of the major factors that weakened the Soviet Union, its absence means that the USSR never truly diminishes, remaining strong well into the 1990s. Meanwhile, North Korea joins the space race in this world, focusing on space technology instead of nuclear weapons. It's not explicitly stated, but it's implied that in this version of history, North Korea never develops nukes at all. This is intriguing. It's a fascinating concept executed with the kind of care and world building that makes you believe this alternate reality could have actually happened. The show does an excellent job of blending political what-ifs with grounded human storytelling, and it keeps raising the question of how one historical change can ripple through time. If you're a fan of alternate histories or space dramas, For All Mankind is absolutely worth checking out. Okay, Amr? For All Mankind was on my list, but the big reason that it's on my list you didn't mention. So I wonder if you know that Ronald D. Moore, one of the major writers of TNG, is the showrunner. For All Mankind is his show. Yeah, he moved from Battlestar Galactica onto that. Apparently, he's not currently a showrunner, but he co-created the show and was the showrunner for, the first couple of seasons with Matt Wolpert and Ben Nadivi, who took over as showrunner for him, according to this, in this regard. But yeah, that was the big reason why I was interested in it, because Ronald D. Moore is Ronald D. Moore. I mean, we're talking about this dude's won a Peabody Award. Battlestar Galactica aside, he was one of the principal writers on Star Trek, The Next Generation. So, yeah. That is definitely a major reason, and maybe indirectly is one of the reasons that you also enjoy the show, in addition to the alternate history. So if you didn't know that, Amr, this show absolutely has Star Trek in its DNA. So there you have it. But it's definitely on my list. Definitely when I get to Apple TV Plus. Oh, so much shit to watch. Okay, moving forward. Those are 3 new shows that Amr recommended: Department Q, The Plot Against America, and For All Mankind. Gotcha. All right. So now the part of the email he says that I'm sure you have been waiting the most for, Ray. It's time for my Star Trek watch update. I've watched so far 3 episodes of TNG and DS9, and wait for it, 1 episode of the original series. So let's get started. Well, based on the episode of the original series that you watched last time, I already know which one you've watched. If you're going in the order that I think you're going in, I already know which episode you've watched, which, ooh, that's a doozy of an episode. Can't wait to get to that. But here, let's start with your thoughts. On TNG Season 7, you were on Episode 7, Dark Pages. Ooh, oh boy. Oh, he says, yet again, we have another Loxana Troy episode. Yeah, but this one's heavy. This one is the heaviest Loxana Troy episode in the franchise, truthfully. He says, like I said before, I've come to find that Loxana Troy episodes aren't really fan favorites, but actually despised. Would love for you to comment on this. I, however, find them amusing, he says, especially when you've gotten to know the TNG crew, since these episodes often serve as lighthearted tension breakers after heavier ones. Whenever Loxana appears, you expect her usual flamboyance and humor. Before getting into the rest of what you're saying here for this particular episode, because this one is not about flamboyance and humor, yeah, Loxana episodes never really annoyed me. I mean, they were ones that were always kind of throwaway to me. The one where it was her and Timothy, where she was trying to keep him from killing himself in the death ritual and whatnot. The one that Michelle Forbes actually appeared in the 4th season, that was a heavier one, or a more serious one that she was involved in. Probably one of the more fun ones that she was involved in was Menage a Troy, where that whole silly thing with the Ferengis, capturing them because the one Damon fell in love with her, and Picard had to do that thing where he had to pretend that he was madly in love with her and threatened to destroy the Ferengi ship at the end of the episode. That was funny. But yeah, I've never been terribly annoyed by it, but yeah, the fans, no, they have never really cared for those episodes, largely speaking. There was a podcast that I used to listen to that's still going called The Greatest Generation. It was 2 guys that basically were going through every episode of TNG, and they had what they deemed veto powers, where if they wanted to not watch an episode, one of them could use a veto, and then the other one had the ability to out-veto them and say, no, we're watching the episode. which they ended up doing, so they didn't end up skipping any episodes of TNG. But the ones that they would typically use vetoes on, one of them would use a veto on a Luoxana episode, and the other one would go, "No, we've got to watch it." And but so that was commonly a theme with that particular podcast. And I don't listen to them anymore, but I used to listen to them years ago before I even started podcasting. That's how long it's been since I listened to it. But yeah, Luoxana episodes, generally speaking, don't have the greatest perception in the fandom, for sure. But he says this time it's something different. This episode centers around her, but she isn't exactly the comedic focus this time. No, she is not. Not in this episode. For those who've watched Deep Space Nine Season 1, this tonal shift might not come as big of a surprise, he says, as she also appeared in a more emotional episode there with Odo. Yeah, but she's got a comedic one coming. Don't worry, you'll get to that one later. Here, however, he says, we learn about her deepest secret, the loss of her firstborn daughter, Kestra, Deanna's sister. Kestra's death was accidental. She drowned when Deanna was very young, so a tragedy so painful that Luoxana repressed the memory entirely. This revelation recontextualizes much of her behavior throughout TNG. The episode also introduces the Cairn, a telepathic species who communicate solely through thoughts. We immediately sense something is wrong with Luoxana when she meets the little Cairn girl. Wait a minute. Kirsten Dunst? Yep, that's right, Kirsten Dunst. He says, quick Google search later, it is her. Oh yeah, definitely. That is a very young Kirsten Dunst in that episode. She might have done this maybe, this would have been a few years after Interview with the Vampire, which was like her breakout role. Anyway, he says, okay, moving on. Later, Luoxana collapses and falls into a coma, forcing Deanna to enter her mother's mind to uncover what is tormenting her. Inside her mind, Deanna experiences surreal and symbolic imagery that reflects her mother's buried grief. Similar to Phantasms, where Data's dreams carried hidden meaning, we also briefly see Deanna's late father, though only as a projection within Luoxana's psyche. Ultimately, this episode turns out to be heavier and sadder than one would expect from a Luoxana Troi story, but it's an enjoyable and emotional one overall. Dark Page is definitely a powerful surprise in this final season. What begins as a typical Luoxana episode evolves into a moving exploration of grief, guilt, and memory. Major Barrett Roddenberry, I will add that, delivers a really good performance here, peeling back the layers of a character long seen as comic relief to reveal pain beneath the bravado. The introduction of the Cairn serves a dual purpose, he says, as a narrative tool to dive into Luoxana's subconscious and as a mirror for her difficulty with emotional openness. Her interactions with the Cairn girl, Hedro, Kirsten Dunst's character, become the emotional key to unlocking her repressed trauma, the death of her daughter Kestra, whom she'd erased from memory. Deanna's telepathic journey inside her mother's mind not only deepens their relationship, but also feels like a spiritual continuation of episodes like Phantasms and Violations, exploring the subconscious through surreal dreamlike imagery. Dark Page stands out, he says, as one of the most emotionally resonant episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation's final season. What could have been another comedic Luoxana adventure instead transforms into a poignant story about grief, memory, and the bond between mother and daughter. I appreciate how this episode reframes Luoxana Troi, he says, not as comic relief, but as a layered tragic figure masking decades of emotional pain. The use of the Cairn and their telepathic communication allows the narrative to explore her psyche in a visual and symbolic way, much like Phantasms did for Data. It's a quietly devastating story anchored by powerful performances from both Majel Barrett Roddenberry and Marina Sirtis, showing that even the most flamboyant characters in TNG carry deep emotional truths. Dark Page ultimately reminds us that healing sometimes comes only when the past can finally be spoken aloud. Yeah, I think that the general perception is that Dark Page is the strongest Luoxana episode, and maybe even the strongest period, like even encompassing her time on Deep Space Nine, and she's going to make another appearance. I'll just say that. She will make another appearance in Deep Space Nine, and it will be a lot lighter than this one. She's going to cause quite a bit of trouble, to be honest with you. But at any rate, no, this is a heavier episode. This is definitely a darker one. I remember watching this when it aired, and the teaser for it was crazy because it's that point where she's like, "Get away from her," walking towards the camera as Troi wakes up from probing her mind. And it's heavy. It's very heavy, and really, you've elaborated on just about everything out of it. So yeah, definitely a strong one for sure. And what is a stronger season 7 than maybe perhaps fans understand or anticipate, or accept, I would say. And not that season 7 gets like a bad rap or anything. It's just it's the last one. It's the final season. But There are some episodes. There's an infamous episode. Have we gotten to that? Have we talked about that episode? No, I think we have talked about that episode. Oh, no, we haven't. Nope, I just double checked. Okay, there is an episode there is a very infamous episode of this season that we're gonna get to, that you're gonna get to in probably the next couple of emails. Yeah, when we get there, I really am curious to hear what you have to think about it, because it's up there with like other infamous episodes of the show, which I'm not gonna name because I don't think you've watched any of these other infamous ones yet. Oh, Move Along Home. The Wadi episode in season 1 of DS9, that's the infamous fan episode, and so is a particular TOS episode that you haven't watched yet that leads off the 3rd season, and also an episode of Voyager that, involves salamanders. That's all I'm going to say. We're going to wait till you get there, but here, the second episode of TNG that you watched is episode 8 of season 7, Attached. Oh yeah, yep, definitely. Since the beginning of The Next Generation, he says there's always been this will they, won't they tension between Captain Picard and Dr. Beverly Crusher. It hasn't been at the forefront for quite some time, but Attached brings that dynamic back into focus, and in a deeply satisfying way, he says. What makes this episode special is how it takes their long unspoken affection and forces it into the open through a clever science fiction twist. Picard and Beverly are telepathically linked. This connection strips away their ability to hide behind formality or duty, exposing emotions they both buried for years. The result isn't melodramatic, but tender and introspective. Patrick Stewart and Gates McFadden deliver beautifully subtle performances showing the mix of warmth, awkwardness, and vulnerability that defines their relationship. It's been a while since we've seen these two share an adventure, he says, and the telepathic link serves as both a plot device and a metaphor for emotional intimacy. Through it, we watch their professional walls crumble piece by piece until they can no longer pretend their feelings don't exist. The story transforms years of glances and hesitation into honest, heartfelt dialogue, something both characters and fans have long been waiting for. Alongside the personal story, he says the episode introduces an intriguing new culture, a planet divided into two factions, the Kess and the Prit. Both belong to the same species but are separated by deep ideological differences. The Kess seek to join the Federation, while the Prit isolate themselves completely. At first, the Kess appear to be the good guys, but the more we learn, the clearer it becomes that their society is far from ideal. Their paranoia and surveillance culture reveal a people still ruled by fear, not ready for the openness the Federation values. Meanwhile, the Prit's isolationism, though extreme, feels almost understandable given their history of conflict. It's classic TNG, using alien politics to reflect the episode's emotional theme of connection versus division. The Kess subplot even offers a touch of dark humor. When Riker enters their quarters, he finds them crammed with gadgets. It momentarily feels like the Kess might have ulterior motives, perhaps even to trap a Federation ship. While that theory doesn't pan out, the scene highlights how paranoia can border on absurdity, and TNG cleverly uses humor to underline deeper unease. There's also a lovely bit of world building, he says, early in the episode during Picard and Crusher's breakfast. Their casual discussion about Earth being united under a single government gives us one of the clearest glimpses into 24th century civilization. Nations still exist culturally but not politically, coexisting under one global authority. It's a perfect Picard and Crusher moment, philosophical conversation mingled with quiet personal chemistry. All in all, Attached is a wonderful blend of romance, sci-fi, and introspection. It rekindles one of TNG's most understated relationships, showing that sometimes the greatest connection comes when two people are finally forced to stop hiding behind silence. Yeah, the will they, won't they between Picard and Crusher definitely gets amped up with this episode and further on as you continue down the road of TNG. I will just leave it at that. Perhaps it even goes into other shows. I'll leave that where that is as well. But let's get to your third episode of TNG, the last one you have for this particular email. Oh, Force of Nature. Okay. Wonder what you thought about this one. This one's a little heavy-handed, in my opinion. A bit after school special. I think you might understand where I'm coming from with that. He says, I see what they were trying to do in this episode. It's clearly an allegory for climate change and global warming. Yep, absolutely. When I first read the synopsis, I was intrigued. How would they approach such a real-world concept like environmental collapse, fossil fuel emissions, and global warming in a high-tech sci-fi setting? Star Trek is built on the idea of a bright, evolved future where humanity has moved beyond such problems, so tackling this issue within that framework immediately caught my attention. That's what makes Force of Nature such an intriguing concept on paper, he says. Star Trek has always used science fiction to reflect real world issues, and here, the idea of warp travel damaging subspace is a clever metaphor for environmental destruction caused by unchecked progress. The writers take something as iconic to the Trek universe as warp drive, a symbol of exploration, optimism, and human ingenuity, and reframe it as something potentially harmful. That's a bold idea, he says, suggesting that even in a utopian future, technological advancement can still have unforeseen consequences. Star Trek has often held a mirror to our world through allegory, and I respect what the writers aim for here. The concept opens up fascinating questions about sustainability and accountability in the Federation's future. Still, I found myself underwhelmed by the execution, he says. It's one of the weaker episodes of the season, maybe even the series, but I can't deny that it left me intrigued by the implications of its ending. What stood out was the lack of follow-up, he says. TNG isn't known for carrying plot lines forward, aside from a few exceptions, like Worf's discommendation, Picard's Borg trauma, or Data's development. And this episode's idea of limiting warp speeds to warp 5 for environmental reasons seems to vanish afterward. It's especially noticeable since the very next episode I watched, Deep Space Nine's Second Sight, has O'Brien modifying a ship to go warp 9.6. That unintentionally undermines the gravity of the warp pollution revelation here. Still, I appreciate the ambition behind Force of Nature, he says. The notion that even a civilization as enlightened as the Federation isn't immune to the moral dilemmas of progress is thought-provoking, even if the episode doesn't fully stick the landing. Overall, it's an episode I respect more than I enjoyed. The intent is stronger than the execution, but it fits perfectly within Star Trek's tradition of asking uncomfortable questions about ethics, responsibility, and the price of advancement. Yeah, I hear you on that, Amr. And it's tough, because if you're going to do that allegory, warp drive is like the perfect thing to use. The problem is you back yourself into a corner. Because when shit hits the fan, you're not going to not go to warp 9, right? You're not going to not go to maximum warp. That's not going to not happen. Whether you're aboard the Enterprise, whether you're aboard a runabout or a different ship, you're going to do that, right? And also on top of that, what they talked about at the end of the episode, where the Federation was mandating a warp 5, for environmental reasons, they already expressed concern that other races wouldn't follow that edict, whether it was the Klingons, Romulans, the Cardassians, or anybody else. So it's like, yeah, no, this isn't really going to get followed at all. And also, they were also suggesting that the damage to subspace was localized in a particular part of the galaxy, so that's the other headcanon, is like, well, it's not the entirety of the galaxy, they just avoided that particular part of it in that regard. So, yeah, it's tough, because you can't back yourself completely into a corner with warp drive. You're going to have to keep using warp drive the way that you've always been using it for all of your other stories that you're going to tell in that regard, right? So, yeah, that's the tough part with something like that. I get it. But yeah, I'm with you. This would be an episode to respect more than necessarily enjoy, because even in the heavy-handed after-school special execution of it, it's not going to go any further. It just can't. Not for the machinations of how the show actually operates, and also how the other shows operate. Warp 10 is going to be achieved by someone in one of these shows. I won't say who or how or what happens after it occurs, but I will just say that happens. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. So that's it for your TNG episodes. Now let's get to the 3 episodes of Deep Space Nine that you watched. Starting with episode 7 of Deep Space Nine, episode 7, Rule of Acquisition, for season 2 of Deep Space Nine, episode 7. He says, this is another episode centered around our Ferengi, Quark. Yet again, we delve into Ferengi culture and politics. Oh, get ready for a deep dive further into that. You're going to be a Ferengi expert after this. DS9 spared no expense, diving us headfirst straight into Ferengi culture. We know so much more about the Ferengi now, thanks to DS9, and Quark in particular. He says, I've talked a little bit about this episode with you on Threads when you posted that giant freaking robot Star Trek article headline. What I loved about DS9 from the beginning was how it gives us deeper insight into the Ferengi. In TNG, they were always portrayed as one-note, incompetent antagonists whose only objective was profit regardless of who it affected. But in DS9, through Quark, we learn about their culture, rules, and values, and that perspective completely reshapes how we perceive them. That's one of Deep Space Nine's greatest strengths. It recontextualizes entire species that TNG mostly use as caricatures or comic foils. Yeah, and it's not that they didn't, and by the way, the giant freaking robot thing that he's pointing out, it's this stupid-ass headline. Giant freaking robot is a Gamergate rag that nobody should pay attention to whatsoever because it's highly toxic. It's like that is actually like a Breitbart of geek news, truthfully, which hilariously I was accused of being way back in the day, which is utterly insane. But at any rate, this person, one of the writers, put out a headline saying that Star Trek needed to accept that the majority of its fan base was conservative and they should just deal with it. And no, that's absolutely not the case. And I actually got a good amount of traction on reposting the screenshot of that and saying, "Tell me you know shit about Star Trek without telling me you know shit about Star Trek" in that regard. And yes, Amr did make a comment regarding the Ferengi with respect to that. But yeah, that's what he's talking about for anybody that is curious about that. But with respect to the in depth with the Ferengi culture, what I like about how DS9 delves into it is that they didn't really like push aside all of the one note stuff that TNG did. They just added depth to why they do it, to why it happens in that regard, right? And that's what I really appreciate about the depth of that. For example, like Amber says, I really like that Rules of Acquisition continues that effort by expanding on Ferengi society, not just their obsession with profit, but also their deeply ingrained traditions and sexism. Through Quark, we actually see Ferengi culture from the inside rather than as an outside commentary or punchline. It's fascinating because TNG's Ferengi were mostly one-dimensional, shrieking, greedy, and silly, but DS9 gives us a Ferengi protagonist and says, okay, let's really look at what makes this society tick. It humanizes them while still keeping their absurd sense of greed and commerce intact. Right, so it doesn't betray the shrieking, greedy silliness that was in TNG. It just gives it depth and tells you why they do it, right? He says we first got a glimpse of Ferengi business and society in the season 1 episode, The Nagus. This episode expands on that, bringing back the Nagus Zek, once again played wonderfully by Wallace Shawn. It won't be the last you see of him either. He's going to pop up more than a few times for the rest of the show. And introducing something we've never seen before, a female Ferengi. In TNG, it was established that Ferengi women aren't allowed to wear clothes or engage in business, so it made sense we'd never seen one there. Naturally, that couldn't be shown on 1990s network television, but here DS9 uses that absence to make a point. The show cleverly uses those cultural restrictions to explore and critique Ferengi society without breaking established canon. You're right about that, Amr, but I will also let you know that as far as that particular aspect of Ferengi culture, it's going to get dealt with. And you're going to sort of see it. You're going to sort of see it. We'll just wait for that time, because again, that's down the road. But yeah, this is your introduction into Ferengi culture. You're going to get a full-throated knowledge of this culture throughout this series. He says the introduction of Pel is such a clever storytelling move. Through her, the episode exposes the absurdity of Ferengi gender politics, a culture that prides itself on capitalism, opportunity, and profit, but arbitrarily excludes half of its population from participating. It's one of those instances where DS9's writing balances satire and sincerity so well. This episode dives deeper into gender politics, and if it aired today, it would likely be called woke. Oh yes, very much so. It even toys with the concept of sexual orientation through Quark's interactions with Pel. While it's never stated outright, it's clear that Quark begins falling for Pel, who he believes to be a male Ferengi. The story handles this with surprising subtlety and empathy for the time, letting the emotional truth of Quark's attraction play out naturally before the reveal. Character-wise, this episode marks real growth for Quark, he says. He's still greedy and profit-driven, but perhaps a little less misogynistic. When he discovers Pel's true identity, he doesn't expose her. Instead, he protects her and even stands up to Zek himself, using his own line against him. Stupidity is not an excuse. It's a rare, powerful moment for Quark, where his sense of decency outweighs his self-interest. DS9 doesn't portray this as a full moral awakening. He's still a schemer, but it's clear that his time on the station, surrounded by people like Kira, Dax, and Sisko, is reshaping him, even if he'd never admit it out loud. As for Pel herself, I didn't quite know what to expect from a female Ferengi's design, but it makes sense that she looks nearly identical to the males, he says. The show avoids anything exploitative and instead emphasizes that Ferengi females are distinguished primarily by their smaller earlobes other than their chest. It's a clever detail that fits perfectly within Ferengi culture, where lobes are seen as symbols of intelligence, business sense, and sexual appeal. This small difference becomes a meaningful metaphor for how the Ferengi judge and suppress their women. Ultimately, Rules of Acquisition isn't just another Ferengi comedy, it's a story about inequality, courage, and quiet rebellion. Pel's actions challenge her society's norms, and through her, Quark's moral compass begins to shift ever so slightly. It's funny, socially aware, and one of DS9's best examples of how to expand Trek's universe through character-driven storytelling. And there again is another incredibly thought-provoking review of a Season 2 DS9 episode that I've never seen delved into quite that heavily. I mean, bravo. Very well done. Fantastically done. And I will also tell you, just to add to that very eloquently, Amr, is that Quark's growth absolutely goes on through the show. And he does not end the show as the same person as he did when he started the show. That is for sure. Even though the Ferengi greed and the scheming never really goes away, he just becomes more human in that regard. And he may hate that, but it's just part of his personality in that regard, for sure. And why not? Because the Ferengi are absolutely, they're early humans. They're capitalists. They're basically current day humans, present day humans in that regard, right? Because that's essentially how our society operates today, especially with respect to lack of respect for women and whatnot. If they could, suppress them and not have them involved in business deals and not allow them to wear clothes, I bet a bunch of assholes in the government would probably do that. But anyway, I digress. Let's move forward from that nonsense and go on to episode 8, Necessary Evil. What a fantastic episode, Amr says. This was really good. Star Trek The Next Generation has attempted the detective noir storytelling device many times throughout its run, but of all the detective noir stories they've attempted, this is easily the best one. It's got everything. The mystery, the hardened lawman detective narrating, which in this case is our security chief Odo. I bet if I watched this episode in black and white, it would look just as good. Here we have something of a scenery change too. We've always heard how DS9 was once a Cardassian station before Bajor's independence and the Federation's arrival, but we've never seen what it looked like. And in this episode, we do, and it's as gloomy as depressing as one might expect. Also, very blue, lol. Oh, yes. Quite so. Terok Nor. Get used to that, because that's what the Cardassians called it beforehand. Necessary Evil is one of Deep Space Nine's finest hours so far. It takes the detective noir influence that TNG occasionally dabbled in and perfects it through Odo's lens. The use of flashbacks, dim lighting, and narration gives it an authentic noir feel that completely fits DS9's darker tone. Seeing the station during the Cardassian occupation is one of the most striking parts of the episode, he says. It's a rare chance to see DS9's history in action rather than just hearing about it, and the oppressive atmosphere is captured beautifully, smoky, dim, and suffocating, matching the moral ambiguity of the story itself. That also shows us a bit of Odo's life during the occupation. It's strange seeing him not as the hardened lawman we're used to, but as someone shy and unsure of himself, still trying to figure out what or who he is. Definitely an Odo-centric episode, and another memorable one at that. This episode really peels back Odo's layers. During the occupation flashbacks, we see a more tentative version of him, still forming a sense of identity and morality. He hasn't yet become the steadfast, principled constable we know. He's a changeling learning what justice means in an unjust world. It's also fascinating, he says, how his neutrality is portrayed here. Even under the Cardassians, Odo believes in fairness, but that fairness is shaped by the circumstances. He's essentially serving an oppressive regime, yet trying to uphold some kind of integrity. That tension adds so much depth to his character and makes his evolution through the series even more meaningful. Something else I really liked, and didn't expect, he says, was not only seeing Odo during the occupation, but also Kira. That was most definitely a surprise. You'd think it makes sense she would play a role somehow, especially since we know about her rebel past, but I figured she would have been on Bajor itself rather than the station. That reveal adds an unexpected but logical layer to both Odo and Kira's shared history. Until now, we've heard about Kira's time as a resistance fighter mostly through dialogue, and it makes perfect sense in hindsight. Kira's presence on the station during those days shows how deeply intertwined her life has always been with the place. It's not just the Federation's arrival that makes DS9 meaningful to her, it's also her own past there, her trauma, her defiance, and her early connection to Odo. That scene between them, when Odo learns the truth about Kira's involvement in the murder, is such a powerful moment. There's no anger, no betrayal, just quiet understanding. It says so much about both of them, he says. Odo's commitment to truth and Kira's moral complexity as someone who's had to make impossible choices. The ending also propels Odo and Kira's relationship forward. The entire episode revolves around the murder of a Bajoran chemist, the one case Odo couldn't solve. The reveal that it was Kira who killed him to prevent him from sabotaging resistance efforts against the Cardassians ties everything together. Odo learning this doesn't damage his relationship with Kira, but it certainly puts it into a new perspective. That's exactly what makes Necessary Evil so memorable, he says. The revelation that Kira was the killer could have been a simple twist, but instead it becomes a deeply human moment that reshapes our understanding of both characters. It doesn't destroy their relationship, it deepens it. Odo's reaction isn't anger or disappointment, but quiet reflection. He's a man built on order and truth, yet he realizes that the truth here isn't black and white. It's soaked in the moral ambiguity of wartime survival. Kira's decision wasn't about malice, it was about protecting her people. And the noir framing makes it all work perfectly. The unsolved case, the retrospective narration, the dim lighting, the fatalistic tone. He says it feels like a 1940s detective story transplanted into Deep Space Nine, but with Star Trek's signature moral weight. Also, the theme of neutrality, he says, was something I really enjoyed. Odo has said again and again that he isn't on either side and is neutral. His neutrality defines who he is, as both Bajorans and Cardassians use him as a third party to settle disputes. He's neither Cardassian nor Bajoran. He doesn't even know what he is. But the time has come to finally take a side, if you will, when he interrogates Kira and she tells him about the resistance plan. Now, does he give Kira up to the Cardassians and sabotage the resistance efforts, or protect her? The neutrality theme really sits at the moral center of Necessary Evil. Odo's neutrality isn't just political, it's existential. As you said, he's caught between two species, two moral codes, and two ways of thinking, the order of the Cardassians and the passion of the Bajorans. During the occupation, neutrality was his shield. It gave him purpose when he had no clear identity. But in this episode, that neutrality is tested in the most personal way possible by Kira. His choice not to turn her in quietly marks the first time Odo takes a side, even if he won't admit it. It's an early sign of his humanity, for lack of a better term, starting to override his rigid sense of justice. And that's what makes this episode so brilliant. It's not just a detective story, it's Odo's moral awakening. That is a great deal that you've taken out of that particular episode, Amr, and all I will add to is this. Without spoilers, I will tell you that you are merely scratching the surface of Odo's moral complexity for the rest of this show. And there's a bomb. There is a massive bomb that is about to land in his life that you're not ready for. And when you get there, which will be soon enough, boy oh boy, you're going to see him as morally and emotionally conflicted as you will ever see him ever. And again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You're not ready for it. When you get there, we shall discuss. That is all I will say. But yeah, great breakdown of this particular episode. Now let's get to Second Sight, Episode 9, Season 2 of Deep Space Nine. He says, okay, I'll be one to admit that romance has never really been one of Star Trek's strong suits. And honestly, it's understandable. It's hard to establish a well-paced love story within a 45-minute runtime, he says. I always felt it with TNG, and it makes sense that given the show's... I always felt that with TNG, rather, and it makes sense given that show's strictly episodic nature. I thought maybe DS9 would be different, since it's leaning more into serialization. We've already seen that in Season 2's opening arc, but it's still tough to engage with these one-off romances when the love interests tend to vanish by the next episode. Maybe as they go on, we'll see a more natural development of relationships over time. You will. I won't tell you who, or how, or why, but you will. Don't worry. There'll be some more definition for that. You will see it. Romance has always been tricky for Star Trek, he says. The franchise usually signs in exploring ideas, philosophies, and moral dilemmas, not ongoing intimacy. But DS9 feels like the perfect show to change that because of its stationary setting and serialized storytelling. Second Sight doesn't quite achieve that, though. It still feels like a romance of the week. Yeah, because they're not there yet. Don't worry. Don't get ahead of yourself. It's okay. You're going to get there. You're going to get to the romances that they're going to establish. It's going to happen. Again, not telling you who, not telling you how, not even telling you why. But it's going to happen. Don't worry about that. You're going to see plenty of it. And it's going to really be fleshed out. What you're hoping for is going to happen. But anyway, about this episode. He says, aside from the romantic element, what we have here is our first true Sisko-focused story since the two-part premiere. What the episode lacks in romantic chemistry, it makes up for in Sisko's personal development. It's not the strongest love story, but it's a great Sisko character piece. Up until now, he's been defined mostly by professionalism, leadership, and lingering grief over Jennifer's death. This episode gives us a closer look at that grief, what moving on might look for him. Even though the Fenna plot feels a bit dreamy and undercooked, it's meaningful because it shows Sisko opening up again, being vulnerable, charming, and hopeful. It's one of the first times we see him not as a commander or as a father, but as a man rediscovering himself. The Fenna storyline starts off intriguing. Her constant disappearances draw us and Sisko deeper into the mystery. Who is she, and why does she keep vanishing? Things get even more interesting when we learn Fenna is connected to Gideon Sadek's wife, Nadell, is there trouble in paradise or is something stranger going on? That setup works really well. The Fenna Nadell twist taps into the classic Star Trek mix of romance and sci-fi intrigue. It begins like a love story, but transforms into something psychological and almost metaphysical. When it's revealed that Fenna is a telepathic projection, Nadell's subconscious escape from an unhappy marriage, the whole thing reframes itself. Suddenly, it's not a story about forbidden love, but about loneliness and emotional suffocation. I'm not remembering this episode at all. Seriously, I thought getting into it, because I thought getting into your description, I would remember it. I'm not remembering this at all. Give me a moment. I need to refresh myself really quickly. Hang on. Okay, now I remember. Sally Richardson Whitfield, I needed to see the actress as soon as I saw her face. Okay, now I remember. This is not one that I watched a ton. I've watched the other ones so far that you talked about more than this one, but yes, this is okay. I am now vaguely remembering this one. All right, fair enough. We can continue. He says, Sayatic, with his enormous ego and flair for the dramatic, becomes the tragic centerpiece, a brilliant man too self-absorbed to recognize his wife's pain until it's too late. The reveal might not be the most shocking twist, but thematically it's powerful. Nadell's species mates for life, and that bond becomes a kind of prison when the relationship breaks down. Her subconscious creates another self, Fenna, as a means of escape. That's tragic, but also a great metaphor for emotional repression and longing. It also mirrors Sisko's state of mind, he says, a man still haunted by loss, subconsciously drawn to someone he can't truly have. It's less a romance and more a quiet meditation on loneliness and coping. This episode also raised an interesting continuity question. I watched it right after TNG's Force of Nature, where warp travel was restricted to warp 5 due to subspace damage, so it's funny seeing O'Brien casually tweaking a ship to go warp 9 here. Maybe DS9 just didn't get the memo yet, or they don't care about the memo because the memo doesn't affect their sector of space, or because the writers were not going to pigeonhole themselves with something that happened in a TNG episode prior. Because, yeah, you can't restrict warp drive, like I was saying earlier, for the entirety of the series and going forward. He says overall Second Sight was alright. I enjoyed Sisko's growth through it all, even if the romance didn't completely land. Maybe romance just isn't my thing. What do I know about it? I'm only 22, lol. Just remain patient, Amr, and let me know what you think about the romances that most certainly do develop in this show. Again, not saying who, not saying how, not even saying why, but they're going to happen. What you're talking about as far as Trek doing romance, you're going to see quite a bit of it. You are. You're most certainly going to see quite a bit of it. And so we'll see how you process it, because there will be some ongoing storylines going forward. And now I'm very intrigued, because if you're not really digging the romance at this point, I mean, they're going to do it better. I'm not saying they're not going to do it better. They are. But I'm just curious as to what you will think about it when you do encounter it later on. But here's the episode. Now, finally, to wrap this up, let's get to your episode of the original series, Star Trek The Original Series Season 1, and I knew this was the one. I knew it. Episode 2, Charlie X. You're going in air date order, because Charlie X wasn't the second episode in production order, but it was the second episode in air date order after The Man Trap. Cool. This is the order that they originally aired them in on the Sci-Fi Channel many years ago when they first started showing Star Trek, and it is the order that I recorded them on VHS tapes when I was recording all the episodes of the original series way back when, before digital or even Blu-ray or DVD anything existed for Star Trek. Now I don't need to do that, obviously, because aside from the streaming apps, I've got all three seasons of the original series in Glorious Steelbook. But all right, Charlie X, here we go. He says, okay, I know I said last time I'm not starting a third Star Trek show in midst of me watching two concurrently, but I just couldn't help myself. I was curious and intrigued the first time around, and so I thought one episode once in a while wouldn't hurt. I might fully start watching TOS as soon as I'm done with TNG's final season. Maybe. So what did I think about this second episode? Well, man, this was intense. Yeah, you got that right. I started this episode thinking it would be a fun, maybe even lighthearted story. Nope. Absolutely not. He says, but it turned out to be something far more unsettling, which honestly made it even more engaging. Oh yeah, this is a very unsettling episode. Charlie X really catches you off guard, he says. It begins like a typical new passenger aboard the Enterprise story, but it quickly shifts into something darker and more psychological. What makes it so disturbing is how harmless Charlie seems at first, just an awkward, lonely teenager trying to fit in, until his lack of emotional maturity and his godlike powers turn the whole situation into an eerie, almost horror-like exploration of what happens when someone unprepared is given absolute power. The premise is simple enough, he says. A 17-year-old boy named Charlie Evans is brought aboard the Enterprise to join a colony. At first, it feels like a light character story, but then you learn he's been stranded on a planet since early childhood. Having grown up without any human contact, Charlie never learned how to interact with others or handle rejection, and that isolation is what makes him both sympathetic and unsettling. At first, his social awkwardness feels believable, even relatable. You almost feel bad for him, this kid who's finally around people again and doesn't know how to act. But as the episode goes on, that awkwardness turns dangerous once it becomes clear he has psionic powers. That's when the story transforms from a coming-of-age tale into something tragic and terrifying. It's easy to see the episode as a metaphor for adolescence, the way unchecked emotions and desires can feel explosive and uncontrollable. Charlie doesn't understand how to deal with anger, embarrassment, or attraction, and since he has no emotional tools or self-restraint, his powers lash out violently when he feels rejected or humiliated. His interactions with Yeoman Rand are especially uncomfortable to watch, he says. At first, it feels innocent, the kind of awkward first crush anyone might experience, even if she's much older. But as his infatuation turns into obsession, it stops being endearing and becomes genuinely unsettling. You can't even laugh it off, because you know that if Charlie feels hurt or embarrassed, someone could vanish in an instant, or their mouths could vanish in an instant. That tension between his childish emotions and godlike abilities keeps the episode gripping, he says. When we finally learn the truth about Charlie's gifts, the whole tone shifts. Up until that point, it's easy to excuse his behavior as social ineptitude, but realizing he has reality-warping powers reframes everything. At first, he uses them like a kid showing off, little tricks to impress others, but once he starts using them to punish or control people, it becomes full-on psychological horror. That's where the story becomes a moral fable about power and maturity, he says. Charlie isn't a villain in the traditional sense. He's a victim of circumstance, a lonely, emotionally stunted young man who never learned empathy or restraint. The tragedy is that none of this is truly his fault. Naturally, this puts Captain Kirk in a complicated position, he says. As the captain, he's the one who ends up having to guide Charlie, essentially becoming a reluctant father figure. What's interesting is that Kirk doesn't seem like a natural parent. From what I know of Kirk from the Kelvin films, he's a womanizer, pardon the word. Don't know if he's the same here. So being thrust into a parental role is an unexpected position to be in. He's confident and charismatic, but this is clearly new territory for him. Still, he tries to teach Charlie discipline and respect, even showing him compassion. You can tell Kirk recognizes Charlie's loneliness, but he also knows how dangerous it can become. All right, time out. I will give one caveat to this, Amr. One thing that you should absolutely continue to remember about Kirk in the original series that is very different than Kirk in the Kelvin timeline, and that is, this is 9 to 10 years later. The Kirk that you saw in the Kelvin timeline took command of the Enterprise much, much sooner than Prime Kirk did. Prime Kirk served as a first officer aboard the Farragut and actually was a captain for a while before being given command of the Enterprise, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly. So he's in his 30s, right? He's like in his mid-30s at this point that you're seeing him now. That is much older, significantly older than where you see Chris Pine's Kirk in the Kelvin timeline, because all of that happened. 2257 was the star date, was the year that the first Kelvin timeline movie took place. That is 9 years before 2266, the year of this first season of TOS. Everybody met each other much, much earlier than they should have in that regard. So keep that in mind. So while this Kirk still has the charisma and still does have the womanizing, he's still older. He is still more seasoned than the one that you see in the Kelvin timeline. So that's an important thing to note with respect to watching this Kirk and comparing him to Kelvin Kirk. The spirit of the character is still there, but this one's older. This one's got more experience. This one is a bit more mature than that one. So, and had to be in order to become captain of the Enterprise. This is not a battlefield promotion. This is not an emergency situation like they had in the Kelvin timeline. He went through the progression, right? Remember, he had both of his parents. He had his father and his mother, right? They were both around. George and Winona were around, to see him grow up. And he went through the ranks normally, not like what happened in the Kelvin timeline. So just something to keep in mind about Kirk and also about the rest of the crew as well. As far as like character dynamics and how they are different. Everybody's older. Everybody is more seasoned in this show than they are when you saw them in the Kelvin timeline. There. All right. Now on to the rest of your thoughts on Charlie X. You said this dynamic between Kirk and Charlie is really the heart of the episode. Kirk tries to be both mentor and protector, while Charlie just wants to be accepted and understood. The relationship ends up reflecting the struggles of adolescence itself, testing limits, seeking approval, learning boundaries. Kirk genuinely tries to help him, but in the end, he's forced into an impossible position. He has to stop Charlie, perhaps if it came to kill him. Perhaps if it came to it, kill him. That balance between empathy and duty gives the episode real emotional weight, he says. By the end, Charlie's instability makes him a full-on threat to the Enterprise. He makes people vanish, including Rand, and it's revealed that the beings who gave him his powers, the Thasians, were actually real all along. They granted him those abilities so he could survive being stranded on their world, not out of kindness, but simply because it was the only way he could live among them. The Thasians are beings of pure thought. They've evolved beyond physical existence and emotions, so they can't understand what it means to be human. That revelation recontextualizes everything. Charlie's loneliness, his craving for connection, even his outbursts, all stem from a desperate need to belong. It's also worth noting, he says, that Charlie is still human, biologically speaking. He was born human, but has been changed by the Thasians' influence. That's part of what makes his situation even sadder. He's caught between two worlds, too powerful to live among humans, but too human to exist among the Thasians. When the Thasians return to take him back, it's one of the most heartbreaking endings I've seen so far. Charlie's panic at the thought of being alone again is devastating. Kirk knows it's the only option. Charlie can't live among humans, but that doesn't make it any less tragic. It's not a victory. It's mercy through sadness. That's what makes Charlie X such a standout early episode, he says. Beneath the sci-fi horror and the powers, it's really a story about loneliness, responsibility, and what it means to grow up. Also, I have to say the actor playing Charlie did a fantastic job, he says. He really sold the instability and the innocence of the character. And compared to TNG or DS9, the look of this show really stands out. It's so bright and colorful, from the sets to the uniforms, and I can't help but think that's because Star Trek was filmed in color during a time when color TV was still new and exciting. Yeah, oh, for sure. Are you kidding me? You look at the shadows, you look at all the different color pops and the set design, absolutely that was done on purpose. They'd only had color television for, 3-4 years at that point? Yes, absolutely. One more thing, he says. Yeoman Rand is a character I wasn't familiar with. She doesn't appear in the Kelvin movies, at least not that I remember, but she's shown up twice in a row here. She seems to be part of the regular crew, serving as Kirk's personal yeoman, essentially his aide. I looked up what a yeoman is. Would she be a recurring character? Still, I'm interested to see how her character and the show in general develops as I go on. Okay, this one's tricky, Amber. Yes, she is a recurring character, but only for season 1. She does not return after that. Until you get to the movies. And there is a point where you see her again in the movies, but it's one of those where you've got to know who she is to know who she is when you see her in the movies. So pay attention to season 1. Rand will be back for multiple episodes in this season, and she will be his personal yeoman. And then they'll kind of move away from that the remainder of the show for seasons 2 and 3. But yes, Janice Rand is absolutely a recurring character for this season and this season alone in the original series. But she's definitely a character, like I said, when you get to the movies, she will recur as well. But you won't know who she is then unless you know who she is now. So it's a little complicated, but yes, to answer the question, she will recur, but only for this season. Cool. He says that marks the end of my latest email update, finally. And as always, thank you for sitting through my constant long emails and wish you, Ray, and the audience all the best. Live long and prosper. Regards, Amr Osama. Well, thank you, Amr, for the update, the comprehensive update on where you're at with both TNG Season 7, DS9 Season 2, and also 2 episodes into the original series. It will be very interesting to see how much further you go in that show. And also thank you for the show recommendations earlier. What was it? Department Q, The Plot Against America, and For All Mankind. Yes, I remember those for sure. But thank you as always for the feedback, sir. Take care. And we look forward to your next Dorsey, or maybe we should call them Amr-sized emails at this point. Seriously. Next time you get through your next batch of episodes of Star Trek and whatever other shows that you are currently watching that you wish to update and recommend to us as well. All right, next up is Alex Da Silva. His email this week is titled Flight Chat 25 Flight Cord. Oh, okay. He's got some thoughts on the Discord idea for sure. He says, hey, Ray, I missed the Celtics v. Pistons game last Sunday. Aw, darn. All right. Too bad you didn't see the Pistons win. He says, I was still basking in the glow of the Patriots' continuing win streak. Man, the last thing the rest of the league needs right now is a resurgent Patriots team. Cue evil laughter. Okay, the Patriots are good. I'm not like terrified of them. It's funny because this has come up again. Like, now that the Patriots are good again, now that they've found a quarterback, and Vrabel, we figured he'd do well because he's always been a good head coach, right? Now it's like, oh, here comes the dynasty. The Mahomes and the Chiefs are just going to hand it back to yeah, okay. Look, the league, the parity of the league. No, we're not witnessing another Belichick and Brady situation. No, I'm not saying the Patriots will be good. No, clearly they will be good, and I do like what they have at quarterback and how they've been playing so far to this point. But yeah, no, I think we'll be okay with respect to that. I mean, they've still got some other competition. Although I don't know. I mean, this year in the NFL, especially in the NFC. I mean, I can't speak so much for the AFC, but in the NFC is wide damn open. Seriously. I don't know who the favorites are. There really is not an odds-on favorite. And I know people are like, the Chiefs are coming back. Whatever. The Chiefs are beatable. Okay? The Eagles showed how to beat them. We beat them 2 years ago in the regular season. The Chiefs are not this juggernaut. They just aren't. Okay? Like, they've won a good amount of Super Bowls, 3 out of the last 5 or whatever it is. But yeah, they are not unbeatable, and they're not to be feared as far as I'm concerned. Like, if they win again, it'll be the football gods, like the football gods. No, where are the football reasons? Can we get the football reasons as to why they will suddenly be a dynasty and be the overwhelming favorite again? No, I don't think there is an overwhelming favorite this year. I think it's the rubbers meeting the road and everybody's pretty evenly matched this year, truthfully. But either way, yeah, it's too bad you couldn't see that Pistons went over the Celtics, but I understand. He says, I'm all on board, with a FLITEcast Discord. The thing about places like Threads and Twitter is that it's completely public, so anyone can butt into anything. But on Discord, you can be much more selective with privacy settings and lay down much stricter rules for how people can post and engage with each other. You could definitely make it so your Discord is a pleasant place where people can civilly talk about geeky things, regardless of whether we agree or disagree with each other. Yep, definitely thinking about that for sure. Might have to really, really dive into that this upcoming week, as far as the logistics and whatnot. He says, wait a minute. Are you telling me that Verizon has a bundle for Disney Plus and HBO Max that are ad-free? If so, I really need to look into that ASAP. Yep, $32. It's HBO Max, Disney Plus, and Hulu, right? Like all those ad-free, okay? It's $32 a month, and yes, it's the bundle that at some point I would like to get to replace the bundle that I have right now through Verizon that gets me Disney Plus, Hulu, and useless ESPN Plus. I would only be using ESPN Plus for one thing, and that's to watch the uncut version of the unrivaled documentary between the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche. That's the only thing that I would watch on it. Everything else is phooey to me, so I don't need it, but I do need HBO Max in that regard. He says about the whole Warner Brothers being sold thing. Let me make it clear, I don't want all those people to get laid off and lose their jobs. That sucks, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. However, if this sale really is inevitable and there's no way around it, my geeky side can't help but imagine how cool it would be for DC to have a presence in Universal Studios. It would be the first time in theme park history that a theme park has both Marvel and DC attractions. Again, I don't want people to get fired and lose their jobs. He's putting that in all caps. But if it's really going to happen, then at least the creative aspect of DC's integration into Universal could be something to look forward to. Yes, and for that reason, I would personally favor Universal over Paramount. I think in either case, and I can't stress this enough, I think in either case, they're going to leave James Gunn and Peter Safran and the DCU alone as long as they make money, as long as they continue to succeed. I think that's going to be the case regardless of who buys them. But with what you're talking about, a presence at Universal Studios, yeah, obviously that would certainly be in the cards if Universal were to buy them out and take over that for sure. You'd see like a Gotham City or a Metropolis or something to that effect, or a Hall of Justice, right? How about that? A Hall of Justice place where we can actually visit the damn Hall of Justice in like the next 5 years or so. Yes, I admit, as a nerd, even though I don't want that massive loss of jobs either, as a nerd, yes, in a first-person like scenario, or first-world scenario, I should say, that would be an awesome thing to consider. He says, as for your question about slashers, I think you may like A Nightmare on Elm Street, but I'm almost certain you'd abhor Friday the 13th. The Friday the 13th movies are trashy, schlocky horror with little to no plot in each movie. The Elm Street movies definitely have a bit more plot, but the most fun thing about that series, in my opinion, is seeing the crazy practical effects in each movie. Since Freddy attacks you in your dreams, that means literally anything can happen. So you see some pretty wild stuff. My recommendation would be for you to check out the original Elm Street movie and see if you like it. The rest of the series has a similar vibe to that first movie, so if you like that one, there's a good chance you'll enjoy the rest. The only exception to this is the seventh movie, which takes a massive departure from everything that came before it. Is that the New Nightmare movie? That's the New Nightmare movie, isn't it? Wes Craven's New Nightmare, yeah. I won't say anything more for spoilers, but a lot of people do consider 1 and 7 to be some of the best in this series. All right, fair enough. Well, okay, I got to try. Perhaps I'll do that next spooky season. I'll try the first Nightmare on Elm Street and maybe see if I go through all of them later on, if I like that first one. But it's interesting. And so among the slashers, Nightmare on Elm Street I might like, but Friday the 13th I'd almost despise or abhor, he said. Intriguing. I think I can kind of see where he's coming from with that. Because like I said, I have seen the Nightmare on Elm Street reboot. I've seen like that one. I just haven't seen any of the original ones in that regard. So that's why I was really curious. Because I mean, that is old school horror and old school practical effects, and it's like, yeah, okay, so how much that, like, I went through this with Hellraiser, right? Because the first two Hellraiser movies, that's 1987, 1988. So that's like really old, like practical effects as well with respect to, that. But there was also like some story and like some development in that I really enjoyed as well. So maybe this is closer to that, perhaps? Maybe so. But all right. Thank you for the recommendation. Thanks for answering the question. All right. Then he says, and now for my final Scarathon update of the season. Last time I briefly mentioned the movie Possessor, and in listening to you read my email back, I realized I didn't make it clear how much I liked that movie. I wouldn't consider it a horror movie. It was more so a sci-fi movie with horror elements, which makes me think you'd really like this one too. The premise of the movie is that the main character works for a shady organization that interferes with high-level business dealings and then murders their targets. But they have a very unique modus operandi. They embed chips in their targets that allow the organization's employees to take over the target's body and consciousness, effectively letting them impersonate whomever they want. Like, imagine you got hooked up to an Animus-like machine from Assassin's Creed that allowed you to wake up in Jeff Bezos' body one morning. That's the type of craziness we're talking about with this movie. All right? Possessor. Why do I feel like I just saw something about this movie recently? No idea, because looking at this poster, yeah, this is not what I saw. I must be confusing it for something else. But all right, fair enough. Thank you for that clarification. He says, next, I watched The Shining. Much like the book, my issue with this movie is that the middle portion is nothing but hallucination after hallucination, which just makes everything feel so, I don't know, weightless. I guess I'm just not the biggest fan of this story in general. However, I am still curious in eventually reading and watching Dr. Sleep one day. Is that movie really different from The Shining, or does it give off a similar vibe? Here's what I can tell you, because I've never read it, but I've obviously have watched The Shining and I have watched Dr. Sleep. And from what I am told, because I enjoy both films, which one do I like more? Probably Dr. Sleep. But I've been told that the Dr. Sleep movie is a perfect sequel to both the film and the book, which is unique because the film and the book are very different. But somehow Dr. Sleep manages to be a sequel for both perfectly. And this is coming from Scott, who is a self-proclaimed Stephen King-like aficionado. So I trust what he says with respect to that. So that is what I am told. I don't know, like, as far as the story, I mean, Dr. Sleep, it follows grown-up Danny, through other circumstances regarding The Shining and whatnot. I really liked the story, or I really liked the film. I thought the film was actually quite good. I'd certainly wish to add it to my library at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I'd still give it a try. I'd still give it a watch. See what you think about it. It's definitely, it harkens back to The Shining and definitely harkens back to elements of The Shining, but not anything that is just so like overbearing. Like, it's not the entirety of the film is what I should say with respect to that. So just keep that in mind. He says, next I watched Cube, which was a movie I didn't even know existed until I went to watch it. A bunch of people wake up in a cube-shaped maze filled with booby traps, and they have to work together to figure out how to escape. This was actually a pleasant surprise. Yes, I've seen it, because Nicole DeBoer, who plays a character in Star Trek that I can't say out loud because Amr hasn't seen it yet, and neither of you, she's in the movie. Yes, and that's why I watched it, because I saw that she was in the movie. So, yep. Good movie. It was, I would agree with you, definitely a pleasant surprise. He says, after that, I watched The Cabin in the Woods. And yeah, this movie was not what I expected based on the title and poster. In a way, this movie proves my grandma was right all along. Horror movies are indeed of the devil. Yeah, technically, that would absolutely 100% support that theory. That horror movies are indeed of the devil. Quite literally in that film. I own Cabin in the Woods. It's quite good. I enjoy it. Next, I watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, he said. For a movie called Chainsaw Massacre, it's notable that only 2 characters actually get killed by a chainsaw. I was also expecting this to have crazy prosthetics with characters getting cut open and stuff, but it's all very sanitary, and the really gruesome kills all happen out of the viewer's sight. This was released in 1974, so maybe movies just weren't that gross yet. Yeah, probably. They hadn't really gotten into that just yet. Then I watched The Substance, he says. And speaking of crazy prosthetics, yeah, all I'm going to say is this movie gets really gross at times. I've heard that. I'm still curious about it, but I've heard that. Next, I watched Eraserhead, he says, which is David Fincher's feature debut. It is? Eraserhead's his feature debut? Hang on. It really? I thought that for some reason I'm not thinking. Am I thinking of a different movie? David Lynch, not David Fincher. David Lynch. Maybe that was a typo or whatnot. Maybe it was an autocorrect situation or whatever. But no, David Lynch, his debut. Was it his debut? I know it's his film, but is it the first film that he did? Where is it? Let's go to Lynch's biography just really quick here. Maybe it is the first film that he did. I don't know. What can I get a list? What is it that when you go to Wiki, it's like and you just want to see the list of it. Oh, okay, yep. His first feature, the independent body horror film Eraserhead, which found success as a midnight movie. Okay. Well, Alex says that he hated it. Wow. Esoteric, tedious, gross, and boring, he says. For me, when it comes to movies, story and character are king. If I don't care about your story and or characters, then it literally doesn't matter how well crafted your movie is or what message you're trying to get across. I just won't care. This was the first thing by Lynch, not Fincher, that I've ever seen, and I'm not exactly dying to check out the rest of his filmography now. Just make sure you know that you didn't watch a David Fincher movie. You watched a David Lynch movie. Not Fincher. Lynch. Just saying. Don't get those confused. So if you haven't watched the rest of David Fincher's movies, I would encourage you to do so, because I've seen a bunch of those, and those are good. I haven't seen a whole lot of David Lynch's stuff, so I can't really comment on that. But yeah, it's David Lynch that you're put off of, not David Fincher. Just clarifying. All right. So then he says, next I watched Marvel Zombies, the 4-episode miniseries that came out last month. This was surprisingly really good, he says. It's crazy that in the mainline MCU, most of the new characters still haven't met. Yet in Marvel Zombies, you have characters like Shang-Chi, Ironheart, Ms. Marvel, Kate Bishop, and many more all sharing screen time and working together. It's crazy the MCU was literally waiting till the big multiverse saga culmination to have most of these characters finally interact with each other. It's like the total opposite of the Infinity Saga. Yep, does feel that way. Finally, he says, I watched Weapons, which was so good. This is the type of movie where you don't feel a single second of the runtime tick by. You're just completely drawn in by the script and plotting. I easily could have experienced another hour of seeing the story come together. This movie also has an extremely satisfying climax and payoff. Between Weapons and Barbarian, Zach Cregger is quickly becoming one of my favorite horror creatives. I'm eagerly anticipating whatever his next horror movie ends up being, he says. Oh, and in case you're wondering, no, Weapons does not rely on cheap jump scares. Based on your horror movie criteria, I think you'd absolutely love this one because it is very story-driven. I can't say too much without giving away spoilers, but this movie is not what you think it is based on the trailers and poster. The most I can say is that the movie presents a mystery that unfolds in a very satisfying way. Well, Alex, I can tell you that I am slightly disappointed because you absolutely could have posted spoilers. I watched Weapons just last night. Night before last, actually. Well, as of the time we're recording this, because this is now going Saturday into Sunday, this was a late recording. I watched it Friday night. It was the last episode that I watched, last movie that I watched for my Flight Fright show that I did on the Patreon, patreon.com/theflightcast. I have a full review of this on Patreon that is available for at the flight officer level, or you can get it individually and listen to it. I had a lot to say about that movie, a whole lot to say about that movie. But yeah, I have seen it. I will agree with you that it is very story-driven, and I will say that the pacing was very well done. I will say that much with respect to, I agree with you about not feeling a single second of the runtime ticking by. Rest of my thoughts, are at patreon.com/theflightcast. And believe me, I went in depth. I have a lot to say about that particular film. Very, very intriguing thoughts in that regard, if you are so inclined to try it out. For sure, good sir. But it's funny that we both ended our spooky season watches on the same movie, Weapons. Intriguing, because Weapons was on my list. Dave the Film Junkie and a number of others were talking about it, and they've been talking about Zach Kreger. And yeah, I will say that I am now curious about Barbarian. But yeah, I definitely had a lot of really pointed thoughts about Weapons. Yes, I did, most certainly. And there, you can go either way with that, with respect to perception. But yeah. We'll have to talk about that in the not too distant future at some point, probably here on Flight Chat. But he said, finally this week, for the next generation, I watched Galaxy's Child. I remember you saying this episode isn't too strong, but man, I gotta respectfully disagree because I thought this one was great. Really? Interesting. He says this episode was a wonderful showcase for Geordi. Man, the guy is completely smitten with Dr. Brahms, but Geordi earned my utmost respect because as soon as he learned she was married, he backed off completely and didn't try anything sketchy. He's a real stand-up guy. This episode just made me appreciate Geordi as a human rather than as Federation engineer. The ending was so melancholy, I felt so bad for him. I hope he finds love one day. Next episode is called Night Terrors, Live Long and Prosper, Alex. So I will tell you, Alex, that your review of that episode and your thoughts about Geordi are not in line with what most people now think of that episode. They pretty much look at Geordi as a creeper. And it's understandable considering the whole holodeck program thing and how he kind of gaslit Leah when she discovered it. I mean, listen, dude, you were being a creepy dude, like falling in love with the hologram. And you set yourself up for failure, Geordi, as far as believing that Leah was actually what was in that program and not realizing what she actually was. And yeah, okay, in real life, he did back off, but he didn't get rid of the program. The program was still there, and there was still the inclination there. And instead of, understanding why she would be outraged at finding that program and seeing what it was, he instead flipped it and made it seem like she was in the wrong when really she was not. So no, I don't think it's a very empowering episode for him at all. So I guess we can somewhat respectfully disagree on that. And then the whole thing with the space baby and all that is just, no, not the strongest episode. And I would say that my perspective on that falls in line with more of the fans than yours does. That's a very interesting perspective that you offer on this episode. But of course, as always, it is all subjective. But yeah, and look, I don't transfer that whole episode to like the entirety of Geordi's personality. It's not that the character of Geordi is ruined for me. It's just that they didn't write him very well in that show with respect to his relationships toward women. They just didn't, in my opinion, subjectively speaking. So yeah, we can respectfully agree to disagree on that one for sure. But at any rate, thank you as always for your feedback, Alex. Greatly appreciated. I will look into the Discord situation and see whether or not that's a viable thing to really start for our little group here. And if you were so inclined, good sir, you can check out Fright Flight over at Patreon and hear my full-throated thoughts about Weapons if you are so inclined, good sir. Thank you very much as always. And finally, we'll close things out with an email from Jared Cardos. This one has no subject, but he's got a decent amount of things that he covers and a few pictures that he sent. He says, "Hey Ray, hope you're doing well. Before I get into your recent episodes, I wanted to shout out something new that dropped recently. Dispatch, a game by new studio Ad Hoc, made out of former Telltale Games devs with some collaboration with Critical Role. It's an episodic interactive story about Robert, the third generation of the superhero Mecha Man, whose suit is totally destroyed after his father's murderer escapes from prison. When he's at his lowest, he's given an offer he can't refuse from the corporation SDC, where they will help him rebuild his suit and become Mecha Man again, under the condition that he will be a dispatcher for heroes on the field, specifically training a team of Z-grade heroes and former villains to make them better heroes. It's still ongoing, he says, 8 episodes, with 2 episodes every Wednesday, and so far it's been really good. You said this is a game? So like an episodic game? I'm guessing they do that. But anyway, he says it has a sharp animated style that feels like an episode of Invincible, but one where you can make choices that changes the course of the story. The story is hilarious, real, and full of mystery, with great characters voiced by some top talent, including Hollywood stars like Aaron Paul and Jeffrey Wright, as well as beloved voice actors like Laura Bailey and Matthew Mercer. So unless the ending massively craps the bed, which I'm doubting, this is definitely a game I would recommend, especially if you were a fan of superheroes, Telltale games, and games in that style. All right, fair enough. Thank you for that recommendation. He says some stuff from your past flight chat. I've also only seen Little Hitchcock so far, having only watched the one you just watched, Psycho, and Rear Window, which was also pretty good. I wouldn't call it a horror movie like Psycho or The Birds. It feels more like a relationship character drama with some suspense and tension mixed in, but it was definitely worth the hype. I've also watched The Birds as well. That's also on Flight Fright on Patreon as well, that review. So I'm 2 Hitchcock movies in. Rear Window is definitely on my list of ones to watch for sure. He says, Rachel talking about meeting Giancarlo Esposito at her local con reminded me of these moments between Esposito and a fan that are hilarious. Oh, yeah, the one where he's pointing the banana at the fan, and apparently this happened twice, where she met him at a con. She said, I got this photo with Gus from Breaking Bad, and the conversation went like this. Hey, can you pretend the banana I found outside is a gun? Him, it is a gun. Me, shit, you're a good actor. And no, it is a hilarious picture. But then I guess she said, I got another photo with Giancarlo Esposito, and the conversation went like this. Me, hey, 10 years ago, I got a photo of you pretending a banana was a gun. Do you remember me? Giancarlo, of course I remember you. Me, shit, you're a good actor. And again, it's him pointing a banana at her head like a gun. Yeah, no, that is funny. That is awesome. He says, as for your most recent flight cast, you essentially ask us if social media is driving us crazy, and honestly, I don't really think so. While I certainly get why it can be like that for others, I find that it's the best place to talk about the hobbies and things that I'm really passionate about. Sure, it can be easy to get locked into doom scrolling at times, especially in today's times. I find the good connections and things you see and find out about outweigh the bad, even still. I will say that I am also active in some Discords, and I certainly wouldn't mind joining one for this, though I wonder if it would affect the Flight Chat show if there was more direct communication. You have mentioned that concern before the last time we talked about this, Jared, and I still disagree with you. And the reason I disagree is because I think if people want to hear their opinions on the air, like if they want to hear them on the show, then they'll still send them in, to be honest with you, because it's for the show. Because not everybody's going to have the Discord, right? It's not like everyone will join the Discord. The Discord will be, like for the long time members, and certainly for the patrons in that regard. Like I'd have to sort all of that out in that regard. Like if you are a recurring Flight Chat participant, if you will, which you certainly are, Alex, Amr, Anthony, Phil, Wally, you of course, John, Sam, and Rachel, and I'm sure I'm forgetting some others, but recurring Flight Chat participants definitely would be a part of it, but not everybody would. So it wouldn't be a case where, like, I think people would still send their, feedback in. I really don't think the Discord would hamper that. I really don't, to be honest with you. I mean, there'd be some questions and whatnot that there'd be direct responses to, but I really don't think it would be, such a massive effect on that. I also think that perhaps you have, just personally, from my subjective opinion, I think you may have more rose-colored glasses when it comes to social media, and that's great. That's awesome. If you were still finding joy in Threads and on X even, and, elsewhere on social media, that's awesome. The rest of us don't necessarily agree with respect to the toxicity, and especially when you're talking about, like finding good outweighing the bad. I mean, yes, you can definitely, like, craft your, experience in your feed, so that you're not seeing so much of the bad, but a lot of times the bad seeps in. Like I follow people that I know I follow them for the good, but they still comment on the bad. They can't help but comment on the bad because there's a lot of bad to talk about. There's a lot of toxicity, and they just can't help. And I can't mute everybody. That's the thing about it. So it's like, well, I don't know, man. Just for me, it just seems like not that I'm getting rid of it anytime soon, but I just don't know how active I really wish to be on it that much anymore compared to, having a more pointed conversation, a more civil conversation that we can regulate on Discord. So, yeah, I do not think personally whatsoever that it will affect any of the feedback for Flight Chat. I really don't. I think that's, no, I think that's a concern that you can put to rest, to be honest with you. I really do. I don't see that changing the dynamic. I don't think people all of a sudden are just going to stop emailing if they are part of the Discord in that regard. Because again, Not everybody will necessarily be a part of it. Maybe new people who are not a part of the Discord will join the flight chat ranks and send in the emails and that type of thing. So yeah, and even so, if somebody wants to say in the Discord, "Hey, let's talk about this on flight chat," I could do that too. Like, that can absolutely be done, right? You know what I mean? So like, we're not. I'm trying to keep things open ended here and figure out exactly what I'm gonna do with this. I'm just looking for a more peaceful way to, converse with you guys in the community without letting all the other toxic bullshit from threads and everywhere else seep into it. You know what I mean? And I know Discord is a way to do that. Phil and the others have talked about that as well. So yeah, definitely something I'm thinking about. He says the facts and figures you bring up regarding YouTube is one of those things where it seems surprising at first until you think about it. And then you smack your forehead and think, well, duh. I know that if I'm not immediately watching a specific show or movie, I often find myself defaulting to YouTube for all of my interests. To talk about a future series on YouTube sounds intriguing, and I'll be looking forward to whenever that comes to be. And I think that'll do it for now. Looking forward to your future episodes. Yeah, there's a show. Actually, I have a few YouTube ideas, but there's one in particular that I've been talking about for a long time and just have not gotten off my ass to actually do it. And I need to. I totally need to, because it's totally up my alley, and I feel like I would have a hell of a lot to say about it, and I should just do it. I really should just flip and do it. And hopefully in the not too distant future, I will. But until then, thank you as always for your feedback, Jared. Greatly appreciated, and looking forward to your future feedback as well. And that'll do it for this week's episode of Flight Chat. Thank you so much to everybody that sent in emails this week. Thank you to John Rosler for his emails and the photos and whatnot. Thank you to Sam Otten. Thank you to Amr Osama for his huge update and recommendations for new shows. Thank you to Alex De Silva, and thank you to Jared Cardos. Thank you to all of you for sending in your feedback, all of you regular contributors as we begin the final 2 months of 2025 here. If any of you want to join in the feedback circle, if any of you have any thoughts that you want to share, any watch updates or whatnot with respect to movies, TV, and other assorted media, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at The Flightcast, on BlueSky at Flightcast. You can comment on the posting for this particular episode at the Flightcast YouTube channel, youtube.com/TheFlightcast. You can also check out the Flightcast Facebook page, and of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care. Stay safe out there. Don't forget, for those of you who live in the U.S., daylight savings time. We got an extra hour on this Sunday as of the time of me posting this particular episode. But take care, stay safe out there, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.